Yes.
The lead Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1268 of the War News stream. And tonight we've seen massive news coming out of Russia. Ukraine is slamming Russia with one of the largest drone attacks of the war so far, and the damage looks to be very extensive. We've also heard of a Russian fighter jet crashing near Snake Island, and the plane is completely lost. And also, Putin has arrived in Alaska with his FSB handlers, and right now they're on the joint base, and we have very big news, and it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of news from around the world, as we have been able to hear of significant developments from the eastern region of Europe, as the Ukrainian armed forces, over the course of the past 24 hours, have conducted the largest drone attack against the Russian Federation seen in the history of the war so far. The damage appears to be significant, with drone attacks hitting the Volgograd refinery operated by Lukoil, as well as the city of Rostov-on-Don being hit by AN-22 variant heavy drones, while the cities of Kursk and Belgrade also came under significant fire as well from the Ukrainian drone attacks. It also appears that at the exact same time as this drone attack, the largest of the war so far, is being conducted by the armed forces of Ukraine, the president of the Russian Federation and the president of the United States are only mere hours away from their meeting in Anchorage, Alaska at Joint Base Elmendorf, as the president of the Russian Federation is already being seen with his security teams and FSB handlers arriving in Anchorage, Alaska ahead of his arrival, along with the United States Secret Service and other elements of the President's bodyguard and protection detail of the United States of America, also taking off from Joint Base Andrews and other bases around the United States to start making their way towards Anchorage, Alaska in preparation of the arrival of the President of the United States. We have also been able to hear other significant developments inside of East Asia and the Middle East, but more importantly, we have been able to get larger details out of Europe, as we were able to hear that the Ukrainian armed forces were also able to shoot down a Russian Su-30 SM south of Snake Island earlier today, apparently with an air defense battery based on the island itself, while we have also been able to see and hear of significant support that is continuing to be provided by by the European Union to the state of Ukraine in the current conflict so far. Not only that, but in Lithuania, we have been able to see that the Lithuanian Ministry of Defense is beginning to outline and highlight to its citizenry and to the public at large the sorts of border defense measures and actions that they are taking to further fortify the Lithuanians against the possibility of a Russian offensive if the Zapad 2025 military exercise is a cover-up to the prelude of an invasion. We have also been able to hear that the Ukrainian armed forces along the front have been able to hold their front lines today, and not only that, we have been able to hear that the deployment of the 1st National Guard Corps, along with the Azov, which is currently near to the area of the Myrnohrad breakthrough, are now attempting to conduct a possible encirclement of Russian armed forces within the area, most likely trapping and destroying in detail the several companies or battalion-strength dismounted infantry unit that is currently as far north as the city of Zloty Kolodias, near to the highway in between Dobropilya and Kramatorsk. We have a decent amount of news to cover today, and of course, we're going to be making sure to get into every single piece of major news that we have, and every other little piece of news from around the world, as we do have some brush-ups and updates from East Asia and the Middle East to cover over the past 24 hours. But moving us directly on into the largest and most major piece of news for the day, we have been able to hear that the Ukrainian armed forces have conducted the singular largest drone attack of the entirety of the war in Ukraine. This is currently the drone attack paths that were seen earlier in the day over the Russian Federation and also over occupied territories that were recorded and accounted for by the Russian Federation. We can see some notable drone buildups and flights being made near to the area of the Crimean Peninsula and also over the Sea of Azov, heading towards to the area of the Black Sea coast near to the Caucasus mountain range. Not only that, we were also able to see some pronged assaults heading deeper into the region near to Volgograd, while we also were able to see a large amount of drones flying towards the cities of Kursk and Belgorod, some drones making it as far as the Tula and Ryazan oblasts, just about less than 100 miles away from the city of Moscow. We were actually able to see a decent amount of video and picture evidence from the attacks over the course of the day and the damage that resulted from those very attacks. Starting off with the most impressive one, at least in the feat of getting the drone into the area itself, we are going to be moving on down into Rostov-on-Don, where we were able to see a full-scale A-22 heavy drone, which generally carries something along the lines of a 500-kilogram bomb inside of it, which is a 1,000-pound explosive if you're using imperial measurements, flew all the way into the city of Rostov-on-Don, intent on striking and hitting key Russian infrastructure and military targets, which we can see in this clip right here. You just see it kind of gliding over. It's like an average person with their Cessna taking a joyride over the city. But this is not
seems to be a little bit low, though. That's pretty damn low right there.
That is. And it looks like they're going incredibly low.
Oh, down.
You can tell by the concussion of that explosion, it was quite a large one. We unfortunately do not know a lot of information about this strike. We have been able to hear reports that apparently electronic warfare interference has resulted in some Ukrainian drones going off the beaten path or out of the control of the operators and has pretty much made them ram into civilian buildings. Other times we have been able to hear that some targets were hit inside of the cities that were actually a part of Ukraine's intended targets, either Russian military officials or some sort of an industrial concern that was based inside of one of these cities. In this particular instance, we do not know exactly which was which, as we were not able to get a lot of details about the surrounding impact site of that AN-22, but the explosion was massive. That's the end of the clip. And I also just saw someone ask, is the pilot okay? Absolutely. The pilot is A-okay. The pilot is several hundred miles away inside of Ukraine. This is a drone-operated aircraft here. This does not have an actual pilot on board. And really quickly, let me go show y'all the A-22 drone. This is the A-22 as it exists in its normal form, which is actually produced, I believe, by the Aeroproct company, but recently it has started to be mass-produced by the Antonov company, which has turned them into a drone variant. Really quickly, let me go see if I can show y'all a picture of the drone variant itself. And here they are. You can actually see that it's the very same airframe as the A-22 Foxbat, but it has been modified painted gray, and also it is housing inside of the craft navigation and communication equipment to be able to communicate with its operator back inside of Ukraine, and underslung inside of the cockpit, pretty much in the pilot seat, is about a 250 kilogram or 500 kilogram explosive, depending on the specific variant of the drone. This means that this, while looking like a normal Cessna type aircraft for the larger part, or a light sport aircraft, is actually a large kamikaze drone and can be operated and fly, from what we've seen in recent attacks over the past year, 800 miles on a single tank, and also successfully hit its target at the 800 to 850 mile maximum range that we've seen so far from these craft. These are also the largest ones in terms of explosive yield as well, far larger than their comparable counterparts, such as the Liudi, which is incredibly common at this point in the war, along with the Mugen 5, which is also a somewhat more common drone used at this point. We have seen other drones like the Banshee and the Marak being used, but those are incredibly rare due to the lack of explosive ordnance that can be carried on board. The A-22 Foxbat, by all measure, is the most common heavy drone that the Ukrainians have for deep strikes, and also has the largest payload yield, meaning that whatever target was going to be hit inside of Rostov-on-Don actually was going to be a pretty important one, considering the payload of explosives. However,
It really is crazy, though, like when you really think about it. Ukraine went from producing their own specialized versions of drones, like these brand new jet drones, which are basically like hybrid loitering munitions and drones in like one package, to literally they have everything from those specialized drones, all the way up to these like custom like Cessna like Frankenstein mobiles like that one that literally just fly around, just an entire plane that's rigged up to fly remotely. It's really crazy like what a wide range that Ukraine has of drones at this point.
It really is nuts. It's actually insane to see this sort of a thing and how fleshed out and well thought out the Ukrainian drones are, with also how cheap and relatively inexpensive that they are to be able to field in large numbers. However, we were not able to confirm the next attack was conducted by an A-22 Foxbat drone, but we were able to confirm that the hardly operational Lukoil refinery on the southern end of Volgograd was hit again, and it started a major fire. We do not know what type of drone in particular hit this refinery, but we were able to see that most of the refinery campus appeared to be on fire not long after the attack, which we can see in this clip right here.
That's a bad fire right there, honestly. It looks like it spread to multiple different areas of the plant itself. And also, by the way, isn't that like the 7th time that specific oil refinery has been hit? Because I think that one's been hit so many times, I can't even remember how many times it's been hit.
Yes, this has been hit about 7 times at this point. It is actually one of the most heavily hit refineries in the Russian Federation, outside of the Ryazan refinery, which I believe at this point has been hit 8 or 9 times, if I'm remembering the count correctly. And to show you all really quickly, this is the Ryazan refinery, the RNPK, and this is the Volgograd refinery on the very southern end of Volgograd right here. What's a little bit ironic, or not really ironic, but hilarious about this refinery is that it was actually under construction at the beginning of the war, and since it has gone operational, it has been out of action due to Ukrainian drone attacks for a longer period of time than it's ever been operational and actual revenue production of refined fuel products, because of how many times it's been hit so far. This refinery is probably never going to be operational because of the amount of damage it continues to sustain from Ukrainian drone attacks and the exorbitant cost of repairs that are having to be effected practically every few months onto the refinery to try and get it back up to an operational level. But it does appear that this is about the 7th time that the Volgograd refinery was attacked and hit. There is a reason for this, for all of y'all to know, by the way. This refinery is actually a somewhat larger one for Russian metrics, and it produces something around 250 to 300,000 barrels of refined fuel products per day, which is a significant amount of the Russian Federation's refined fuel production abilities. With the Russian Federation seeing this refinery knocked out again, it's knocking out a measurable percentage. I think it's something around 1 or 2% of Russia's refining abilities in the country with a singular drone attack. So this was incredibly effective once again today, and it does appear that this refinery will be out again for most likely a couple of weeks, maybe a month or two, before it's brought back up to operation, and then the Ukrainians will most likely hit the thing again. outside
That
of
has got to be so demoralizing. Can you imagine, like, for example, the people that have fixed that plant 7 times over? They're already like underpaid. I would imagine they're underpaid because nobody in Russia really gets paid well at all. So they're underpaid probably. Also, at the same time, they're having to repair the same things 7 times over. Like once they get it fixed, and they're like, "Oh, thank God, we finally got it fixed. We can get back to pumping oil and refining it again." Then the Ukrainians send in another massive hit, and the fire spreads to even more spaces the next time it gets hit. It's really just like it's got to be maddening.
It's got to be absolutely insane, really. Because when you think about it, man, these people are sitting down here, at least the people who run Lukoil, they're like, finally, one of our largest refineries is operational. We'll make so much money. And then you hear, it's like, oh, well, I guess we can repair that one. 7 attacks later, it's been about 2 years straight of attacks on this refinery, and it's been hit again. Like, this thing is actually losing Lukoil more money than it ever would make them at this point when it's attempting to be operational, because they're having to spend so much money and so much time trying to repair the thing and get it back up to operation. Also, that begs the question, what's happening with the workers in the meantime who work at this plant when it's down? I guess they just don't get paid, because when it's down, most of the refinery cannot operate. So with that in mind, most of the employees also can't really do much. So I guess they're just laid off and they don't get paid in the meantime until it's back up and operational. And I also have a feeling that because the workforce here is most likely transient at this point, they probably aren't doing a good job at running the refinery when they're actually on the job, because they have hardly any experience doing that, and they also know that it probably won't last that much longer. But beyond that, a lot of people have been talking about some of the other incidents that have happened around the country today, and I also want to make sure that we cover some of those, at least within the Kursk area, a little bit heavily, because these were incredibly interesting. Inside of the city of Kursk, we were able to confirm that a large amount of Ukrainian drones ended up hitting residential buildings throughout the city. We actually have clips, 2 separate ones, showing some of the impacts on the Khrushchevka commune blocks of the city of Kursk. You see one of them right there, and then in the second clip, you can actually see another heavy impact, once again a direct impact to an apartment building right here, that was also conducted by a Ukrainian drone.
Oh, what was that?
I think that was one of the Russians passing gas or something like that. I really don't know.
Yeah, I couldn't tell what the hell that was. That was weird.
Bro, whoever the cameraman is, they're passing gas better than Russian pipelines do at this point. But beyond that, but bro, beyond that, it does appear that a decent amount of Ukrainian drones did end up hitting residential buildings today inside of Kursk, and there has actually been some circulating ideas about this today, or at least different explanations for it. Some people are saying that these drones are deliberately attacking residential buildings inside of Kursk. Others are saying that a Russian electronic warfare interference is starting to make these drones veer off course over the city of Kursk and then slam into these buildings. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about that as well?
All right, so the Russians are trying to basically circulate this footage showing these Ukrainian drones hit allegedly apartment buildings and also other residential spots in Rostov. And mainly, that main video that we saw of the Foxbat drone going into, it appeared to be a building inside of Rostov. That's got the Russians trying to say that, oh, look, the Ukrainians are now attacking civilians. And it's just the new strategy that Ukraine has, is to resort to that. And they're acting like they're innocent. But, you know, of course, the Russians attack civilians literally 24/7, all days a week. But what are your thoughts about these Russian allegations? So 41% said Russian interference probably sent it off course for propaganda reasons, and 26% said Ukraine has now started hitting cities, and the Russians are right, and 22% said it seems like we need some more info. And I would say we need to hold off for more info, because it's hard to tell. It's a little bit early to tell what's happening here. But remember, a short while back, the Russians claimed that the Ukrainians were also hitting residential buildings in Moscow. But what it actually was the Ukrainians were trying to hit the Russian drone operators that were operating out of residential buildings. And that's the reason why they were hitting them with the Ukrainian drones. So don't put it past the Russians one bit to be using civilian buildings to operate the drones from. That could be exactly what Ukraine is hitting inside of Rostov. And it's a perfect propaganda cover for the Russians to say and allege that Ukraine's attacking civilians. So I have a feeling it's probably something a lot more innocent than it appears. And there's no evidence to show that Ukraine suddenly decided to start hitting civilians. Because if they wanted to, For example, in that one clip from Rostov, there was a massive high rise that they could have rammed that thing into, but notice they didn't do that. They went for a specific building on the ground that was very low to the ground. That was probably a harder target to hit, and they specifically wanted that one building for some reason. So I'm with the 22%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I'm with the 42%. I believe that it's electronic warfare interference that brought these drones off course, because we have seen for years now that the Ukrainians have a pretty solid track record with not attacking any sort of civilians within the Russian Federation, or largely going out of their way to mitigate civilian casualties to only those that are absolutely necessary. Because we have seen in some cases, for example, the first Crimean bridge attack where they loaded up explosives into the back of an 18-wheeler and then drove it across the bridge and it exploded. That actually ended up killing 3 Russian civilians and the driver as well, who apparently was not openly aware that there were explosives in the trailer that he was carrying. But the Ukrainians did deem those to be necessary, and generally, while civilian casualties are supposed to be curtailed as heavily as possible, it still is expected by most rules of engagement and the rules of war that there will be some civilian casualties at some point, although unfortunate. However, the Ukrainians have never gone out of their way to attack residential buildings outright. The only time that I have ever been able to tell y'all, or at least confirm, that the anything affiliated with the armed forces of Ukraine ever went out of its way to directly attack civilians would be the Russian Volunteer Corps' offensive at Shebekino, which occurred, I believe, in the early part of 2024, or it was in the latter part of 2023. It was somewhere around there. But during that time, I think Matthew will remember this as well, the Russian Volunteer Corps advanced into Shebekino along with the Free Russian Army. We called that pretty much the Russian Liberation Army as a whole. And with Grad artillery, they started to bombard the city of Belgorod directly, and we did confirm that in those rocket barrages, around 9 Russian civilians died, and it appeared that they were going out of their way to just generally mass blanket the city with barrages. But beyond that, that is the only time that we've ever seen any sort of Ukrainian-affiliated unit, not even an actual official unit of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, go out of its way to target a civilian area. So generally, even then, there is a bit of a caveat to that. The Free Russian Army and the Russian Volunteer Corps were made up entirely of Russian citizens living in exile fighting against the Russian government. So while a part of the Ukrainian armed forces, still generally Russian on Russian action. And those units have a great deal of liberty with how they operate and the kinds of rules of engagement that they lay out. Just in short, they kind of fight like Russians do, which is not really shocking because they're Russians. But beyond that, that's the only time that I've ever been able to verifiably confirm that any Ukrainian affiliated unit went out of its way to possibly attack civilians. This, however, today would be a little bit odd because Ukrainian drones are cheap, but the Ukrainians still want to make sure to get the best bang out of their buck, and the best way to do that is to go after valuable targets. Blowing up Babushka in her commie block is not really a valuable target, and it doesn't really do a lot to change the way the war is going. The only thing it does is piss off people in the other country and embolden them to fight. We know that to be a certainty these days, so I would highly doubt that the Ukrainians went out of their way to conduct an attack on civilians inside of Kursk, Belgorod, or Rostov-on-Don, and I would more so lean towards the fact that this was highly likely electronic warfare interference, because that will hijack a drone's controls and pretty much make them run rampant. They will glide or fall into something below them, maybe the city where the electronic warfare unit is operating out of, and then explode directly onto whatever it landed on top of. So I would say I would have to go with the 42%. I think that it generally has to do more so with electronic warfare interference than a directed Ukrainian attack against Russian civilians inside of the Russian frontier oblasts. We also were able to hear in Belgorod, speaking of which, that there were other drones that also ended up conducting similar actions. We were able to see here a Ukrainian drone pretty much landing in the middle of the street, which we can see right there. Man, that thing blew out some cinders.
Yeah, it blew out some cinders, but go back, replay this one more time. I was trying to see something here real quick.
Also, by the way, why is that car already messed up?
I don't know.
And also now the video isn't really playing. Okay, here we go. And there it is.
Damn, that's a big hit right there. Also, by the way, there is a typo in the poll, by the way. I was trying to check that real quick. But yeah, this thing right here got blown to shreds, by the way. And that car just got not totaled, but it got messed up.
Yeah, but my question is, why was the back windshield already blown out? I don't know if any of y'all are seeing that, because there's a watermark over it, but why is it already blown out, kind of? Anyways, moving on from that, we also got to see another clip here. where another drone appears to have just fallen into the city of Belgrade. And then we got one more clip. This one was actually quite interesting because we can geolocate this practically perfectly. When we go into the city of Belgrade, you will see a larger stadium somewhere within the center of the city. And now I have to find it on air, and for some reason I'm always very tough at finding this stuff on air, although I try and pre-locate it so I can just zoom in on it directly once we need to see it. So really quickly, let me look for a football pitch. I've got to go find the Belgrade Stadium. Why in the world is this so tough to find on air, folks? I have no clue why. It's like every single night, folks, I go out of my way to try and pre-locate some of this stuff to be able to zoom in on it so that way when we're on air, it's like, wow, this guy does it so quick. That's really crazy. How does he do it? And it's usually through a decent bit of pre-preparation on this. And I'd be dipped, folks. I can't find it. Like, okay, hang on. It can't be that hard. It's a giant stadium. So let me think. If there was a giant stadium, they're going to put it in the middle of the city because it's a bread and circus kind of thing like they do here in America. So where in the world would this thing be? I'm going to give up on it. Let me just type it in. You know what? I'm going to cheat. Belgrade Stadium. And this ain't the stadium. Here it is. Okay, so here it is. There it was, right here. This is it. So, the Ukrainian drone did end up slamming into the side of the stadium earlier today, which we could see in this clip right here.
Oh.
Once again...
Man, that Russian rap in the background has totally, like, changed the whole vibe of the thing. It went from just a terrible tragedy to a more of, like, a spectacle.
Gun officer, arrest me and search my leg. Man. But anyways, the drone did fly directly into the side of the stadium and explode. But once again, an incredibly small explosive yield for the kind of building that's going after, and the building was not occupied when the drone hit. So I think, to be entirely honest with y'all, this has to do with more so electronic warfare interference at this point than anything. Outside of that, however, it does appear that the Ukrainian drone attacks of today were some of the largest of the conflict so far. And it does appear that the Russian Federation is coming under these sorts of attacks almost every other day or every day. And we're most likely expecting the Ukrainian armed forces will keep up this tempo throughout the duration of the war, as drone manufacturing has become one of the largest war industries inside the state of Ukraine, due to its ability to be cost-effective and also greatly mitigate the casualties and fatalities seen within the Ukrainian armed forces, considering that the Ukrainian armed forces are working with a much smaller available manpower pool than the Russian Federation currently does at any given moment in the conflict, either currently or in the past. But outside of that, we have also been able to hear of some other significant developments that have been going on inside the Russian Federation, or largely more so, the Russian Federation and the United States of America. But before we get on into that, I do want to make sure that we talk about the large drone strike, because there has been a bit of a question out there by people, considering that the peace talks, there is apparently not going to be a talk held. We don't even really know what's going on in Anchorage anymore, but outside of that, considering that there's going to be a meeting or photo op or something that's happening in Anchorage here soon, and that's happening here within the next several hours most likely, do a lot of people think that the United States signed off on this attack that the Ukrainians conducted today or not? And Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right. So the big question is, does the U.S. approve of these attacks? And it looks like 67% said yes, the USA does approve of these Ukrainian attacks on Russia, while 14% said no, the USA does not want Ukraine to attack, and 11% said I'm 50-50 on the question. And I would say you could bet your bottom dollar that the U.S. approves of these attacks, because the U.S., while they are like going through this whole like rigmarole with the diplomacy stuff that is really honestly quite tiring, in the background there are some real actions that are actually being taken against Russia when it comes to, for example, sanctioning the Indians for buying the Russian oil, also threatening to sanction China over that as well, also sending more billions of dollars of aid to Europe to sell to Ukraine. There are things going on in the background that the U.S. is actually doing to help Ukraine. So I would say in private, the U.S. probably does approve of these attacks. But in public, though, the yapping, it tells us something completely different. But I would say chalk it up to yapping. The U.S. probably does secretly approve of these attacks. So I'm with the 67%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to agree with with a 67% as well. It's highly likely that the Ukrainians pre-coordinated this with the United States, and the United States gave them an approval to be able to do this. Considering that the Russian Federation did attempt a breakthrough near Myrnohrad just a while ago, several days ago, and it was contained, it's highly likely that the Ukrainians also tried to make a counter to continue to show that the armed forces of Ukraine and the state of Ukraine are continuing on this conflict not from a position of weakness, but equally from a position of strength, much like the Russian Federation tried to show through the Myrnohrad breakthrough, although that didn't really go anywhere, and now that group is possibly going to be encircled and destroyed in detail here very soon. But outside of that, I would generally have to say that the U.S. did give them approval. And that actually brings us on into what's happening that would really lead for the Ukrainians to largely ask for approval from the United States before conducting this kind of action. The Russian Federation has been getting ready today for their little meeting in Anchorage, Alaska, and we actually got to see a video that supposedly was taken from a window on board the Russian Air Force One, Ilyushin, as it landed in Anchorage, Alaska. Actually, by the way, folks, I want to make this a little bit clear. This actually isn't the Russian Air Force One. This is a Russian Ilyushin 96 that was there before Putin arrived, that actually holds a security entourage, some members of the FSB, bodyguards, so on and so forth. This sort of thing is done whenever a world leader is on the move. Most world leaders of more significant countries generally do this. I don't want to say superpowers, because the Russians sure as hell are not a superpower, but more significant countries usually have some sort of an entourage that arrives before their leader arrives to be able to secure the perimeter, make sure to meet with the nation that they are going to be bringing their leader into, make sure that all security sorts of situations have been dealt with, or that there's exigency plans, sorts of things. Contingency planning is the best way to say it. That sort of a deal. That was the video that was taken here. But we can see the Ilyushin in Anchorage. And oddly enough, this solution did not arrive at Elmendorf Air Base. This actually arrived at Anchorage. So really quickly, let me go show you all this, just to make sure that we get this out there a little bit better. This is the Ted Stevens Anchorage International Airport, which this Ilyushin 96 was taxiing down. And we can actually see that based off of where it was moving, it actually appears that it was somewhere on this taxiway right here, near to, let's see. Unfortunately, I can't see what ramp this is, but it's near to runway 25 right. Let's see, exit 7L on 25 right, it appears, and it was moving from there near to this concourse right here, and most likely turning a right turn to find some sort of an isolated pad somewhere down here to be able to disembark from. Oddly enough,
also on these planes too was Putin's personal pooper scooper crew as well. The crew that goes around and collects the waste that Putin leaves behind, so that way no foreign intelligence service can collect any DNA samples or any type of identifying information. So they're also there as well. They don't want anybody to find out that the guy that's currently attending the meeting could be a body double, apparently.
They don't want anyone to know that there's a body double. But I guess that those people on that plane, Matthew, they actually get to say that their job is a pretty shitty job. They actually collect shit. It's like, it's their actual job.
So nasty.
It's gross. But also, by the way, I forgot to mention this. That's actually something that the U.S. Secret Service does as well. Actually, most bodyguard services for most world leaders actually scoop the poop, because you can learn a lot from the poop. There's a lot of DNA held inside of it, and based off of it, if someone gets a hold of the poop, they can actually conduct a great deal of tests and figure out pretty much everything about that leader from a medical standpoint, possible from the poop. So generally, there is always a poop scooper somewhere inside of every single bodyguard service, because there also are some poop scoopers in the U.S. Secret Service. Although I don't really think that that's a high-honored sort of a position to be put into, is the poop scooper. It is somewhat necessary, at least for national security and national defense, although that's incredibly weird to say that scooping poop is a very important part of national defense and national security. That Ilyushin 96 that was seen in the video dropped off its detail and then immediately flew out of the Russian Federation to the Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky airfield inside of the Kamchatka Peninsula, right after dropping these folks off, because the aircraft cannot stay here because of sanctions. So it appears that it had to leave immediately, and we are hearing that later on, Putin's jet is going to be, a Russian state jet landed in Alaska. This is another clip of the same Ilyushin 96 landing. Putin's jet has not arrived yet. Still want to make that clear. Putin's jet has not arrived yet. It's still on the way, but it will be here within the next coming hours. And we see the Ilyushin 96 coming on in.
Why do they need 4 engines for a single level wide body plane?
That's a great question, Matthew. That is an incredibly good question. The Russians, I believe, actually still follow older aviation laws, at least within their country, for air safety. That larger international aircraft like these have to have 4 engines because it was actually the law for a while, at least here in the United States, that any international airliner that flew international flights had to have more than 2 engines, and that's why back in the day, especially during the oil crises, the DC-10s and the MD-11s really took off because they had more than 2 engines, meaning that they could conduct international flights, but they didn't have 4 engines, so they were more fuel conservation minded in the best way, which made them more economical to operate. I know a lot of people know about the flaws of the DC-10 and also the MD-11, but the DC-10 had an issue of this crazy thing. It was called rapid depressurization, where the cargo doors were literally just blast open, and the plane would violently explode as a result of that and break up in flight. The MD-11 didn't necessarily have that issue. Very similar in design, mind you, to the DC-10. They're almost the same aircraft, but slightly different in some measurable ways. Nevertheless, I believe the Russian Federation still somewhat follows that law because they still have on most of their international aircraft 4 jet engines instead of 2 or 3, which is a fairly interesting thing. It looks a lot like an Airbus A340 for that reason.
Yeah, it kind of does actually. It just looks really dated, honestly. It looks very dated. I just don't like the Aleutian planes. I'm just not a huge fan.
Yeah, I don't like Illusion. I really don't like any Russian aircraft. They all look pretty rough, and they always look like a little bit backwards. But nevertheless, we also were able to hear at the same time as the first Russian security teams were making their way to Anchorage, we also were able to see that the security entourage for the United States was also on the way, which is quite a large one. Pretty much all of these aircraft that we're seeing on flight radar here, including about 4 C-17s, a Department of State 737, and also what appears to be some other additional supporting aircraft, were all on their way to Anchorage, Alaska. So quite a like the Russians have, I think, 1 or 2 Aleutians that dropped off some security details leading up to the meeting. America had 4 C-17s, just at a minimum, including a Department of State 737. And all of this is preceding Air Force One, which Air Force One also has an entirely separate entourage that follows directly along with it while it's in flight. So pretty crazy to see the difference. The Russians, Matty, they pretend, they front like they're a superpower, but America brings 4 C-17s just because. One of these C-17s, by the way, folks, actually is carrying the Beast, the armored limo, most likely, because they usually take that to wherever the president's heading, so that way if he has to travel around on the ground for some planned or unforeseen reason, the armored limousine will be available. So that most likely is in one of the C-17s, and there's most likely a great deal of additional equipment, Suburbans, such vehicles that are used by the Secret Service that are also armored, that are being transported on these C-17s. Also, the
All I hear is dollar signs when I hear that. Like, it's so expensive to move the president anywhere because it's all like it's such a huge operation, and it has to be that way for every president. It's not unique to this current one or anything. It's always that way. It costs a hell of a lot of money and planning to do this. But I think the Russians might have a lighter, I guess, entourage, I guess you could say, or a lighter presence, because they simply probably don't have the raw amount of money needed to waste on something like that. So they got to lighten the load a bit when they go somewhere.
Yeah, they got to lighten the load because they're just broke. America's got the money to spend, and also these C-17s have nothing better to do in reality. Most of them are just kind of sitting around at Andrews Air Force Base, because you can actually see that that's where they all took off from. And that promises us that that was the Secret Service, because a lot of the Secret Service are headquartered out of Washington, D.C., although they do have offices around the United States of America, because while the Secret Service is charged with the responsibility of protecting the President of the United States, one of their other big jobs outside of protecting the president is also detecting counterfeit bills, which is a fairly significant thing. So they also have department offices and branches throughout the entirety of the United States of America. And also a little fun fact for all of y'all, up until recently, I believe the early 2000s, the U.S. Secret Service was not under the Department of, I believe it was the, what is it, Matthew? It's like the Department, the National Security Administration, the NSA, something like that. I believe that they were
Secret
actually,
Service is always separate.
they're still under the Department of the Treasury.
I'm not sure about that. Let me check real quick. U.S. Secret Service under Treasury. Let's see about that. Let's see here. Until Secret Service was no longer a part of the Treasury back in 2003. So Secret Service has been independent for a long time.
But for the longest time, just to let y'all know, the Secret Service was actually a branch, an armed branch of the Department of the Treasury. In 2003, after the whole 9/11 thing, and there was a whole restructuring of how the security services worked in America, they were then detached from the Department of the Treasury, and now I think they're under the NSA or something similar.
Homeland Security. That's what they're currently under,
Yeah,
by the way. I was incorrect.
yeah, the Department of Homeland Security. I was trying to think of that, man. The only one I could think of was the NSA, but they are under the Department of the Homeland Security now. So, a little bit interesting fact about the Secret Service. But let me check here really quickly. Let's see if we can see. Yep, there we are. There's a C-17 sitting there at Joint Base Andrews, most likely just for the specific fact of loading on any sort of government vehicles or personnel and then transporting them out. Also, the Department of State 737 is probably carrying, I would assume, the Secretary of State, a couple of other important individuals such as that, their entourage, translators, all those sorts of things. The people who deal with the more standard of living kind of a deal, or more so the actual negotiation itself, that are most likely to be being carried on the Department of State's 737. But nevertheless, I hope that it lays out a little bit of what that's looking like right now, at least from the American side. And we have been able to hear that apparently the president is now considering more possible sanctions on the Republic of India if the peace talks in Alaska fail. I've been hearing that these are not going to be peace talks, that these are peace talks. I don't know what they are, but according to the president, we put secondary tariffs on Indians for buying Russian oil, and I could see if things don't go well, then sanctions or secondary tariffs could go up. That was according to Besson in an interview to Bloomberg TV, making it somewhat clear that there will be economic consequences if the talks fail. The president also said that apparently Zelensky was not invited to the Alaska summit because it was feared that he could derail the talks, most likely by speaking common sense about the Russian standpoints. But nevertheless, European officials insisted on direct representation in the meeting, which would include Rubio and Lavrov, the foreign minister of Russia, and the Secretary of State of the United States, proposing Root or another European leader, as well as Zelensky, participates. However, after telephone conversation between Merz and the president, the European side apparently dropped this demand, and so for this reason, it's going to be solely a U.S.-Russian conversation, is the best way to put it, in Anchorage. But Matthew, what are people thinking of this whole thing?
Isn't it kind of a bad thing when you say that if you invite the country that's supposed to be one of the parties in the negotiation, like for example, you have the two countries fighting Russia and Ukraine, and the third party negotiator says, let's not invite one side because they might derail the whole talks. Well, it's like that might be an indicator that the talks are going to probably go nowhere then, because if the two sides came and meet together without the fear of them, causing the whole thing to fall apart, it's like then that tells you that they're not ready to end it yet. So what the hell's the point of the meeting?
Yeah, I would say it doesn't really make a lot of sense at all. Man, that's literally what I think Chamberlain said leading up to the Munich agreement. He was like, of course we wouldn't include the Czechs. They're going to derail this whole thing. And then they just negotiated away their territorial rights with them not even involved in the negotiations. That probably is what generally is happening with this. And also, folks, I gotta say, I don't know what the hell's going on. Just to make this a little bit clear, and I once again want to say that this is not political, this is just exactly what's happening. We have no clue what's happening in Anchorage. The president has said in two different statements today that one, he expects that there's not going to be a ceasefire or anything close to a peace being achieved, and then on the same moment, on a different sentence, said that peace is almost assured at this point with the Russians. I don't even know what the hell's going to be going on. We've been told that this isn't a peace talk. Now it's sounding like it is a peace talk. I have no clue what's going to be going on in Alaska at this point. It might be nothing, it might be something, and that's really led a lot of people to have the question, what is this thing going to turn into? We have absolutely no clue right now. We've heard just about everything under the sun that it could end up becoming or may not be. So, Matthew, what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about that as well?
So it looks like about 64% said the Alaska meeting will be basically purely a one-time photo op, while 22% said it will be the first icebreaker meeting between the U.S. and Russia, and 6% said I need more info on this one. And it's kind of hard to say exactly where this is going to go. But I can say with confidence, it's definitely a photo op because the U.S. has basically admitted to it being a photo op. So they're saying that out of their own mouth. So we got to run with it. To say it'll be the first icebreaker, I would say probably not, because this isn't like college where they tell you to stand up and say, "What's your name, young man? And what's your favorite food that you like to eat," or something. It's not that type of icebreaker. This right here is basically Putin's going to show up. He's going to try to lecture the U.S. president about the fake Russian history that Putin loves to ramble on about, like he did with Tucker Carlson. He's going to try that same trick with the U.S. president, and we'll have to see if it gets anywhere. And he's going to do that, and then he's going to make some wild demands that Ukraine give up land. They also give up their NATO membership. They also need to disarm. Also, Russia wants to make sure that the Zelensky regime is allegedly gone. I mean, he's going to say all this junk. So it's not really an icebreaker. It's literally Putin's time to come indoctrinate people and try to turn people against Ukraine. That's all this is really for. So it's really just a propaganda mission for Putin. Now, for the United States, it's a photo op, but for Putin, it's his chance to try to brainwash people. So I'm with the 63%. But Enforcer, what say you?
Man, here's how it's going to go. Putin's going to go up there and go, "Listen, are you a president or some kind of comedian?" Anyways, what I was saying was, back in the 11th century, the king or prince, more so, of Nizhny, too long, didn't read, sanction him. Like, it's like, man, that's what it's going to turn into. I'd have to be the 63%. This is going to be a photo op. And it's most likely going to become nothing else. Because anything that, even if anything was agreed to up in Anchorage, no one's going to agree with it. The Europeans are going to be pissed. The Ukrainians are going to be pissed. And I think at this point, whether people want to believe this or not, I think the president is starting to understand that you really can't piss off the Europeans too much because they actually hold a decent amount of cards. In the words of Zelensky, "I'm not here to play cards, but we have all the spades." It's like we have all aces here. And the Europeans have a decent amount of aces up their sleeve. So with that in mind, I don't really think that there's going to be anything agreed on in Alaska at all from the U.S. side, because it would immediately just be countered in Europe. They would just absolutely refuse it and say that this is unacceptable. And then there's going to be the threat of a schism, and then the U.S. would have to back down because, losing the Europeans as a part of the Western sphere would probably be the worst thing that could happen. So it's going to most likely end up that nothing comes out of this, and Putin will be up there doing his usual stupid, idiotic rambling, and the President of the United States probably will not have a damn about any of that rambling because it'll be too long. So with that,
Another bad sign. Another bad sign is this. Literally today, we just covered it. This massive, like the war's largest drone attack that Ukraine launched on Russia, literally 24 hours before the meeting's supposed to take place in Alaska between the U.S. and Putin. That's a bad sign. Also, the advance that Russia tried to force through in the contested regions, that advance that they got through, thankfully the Ukrainians were able to stop it. So they've cut the Russians off. They can't get any further near Pokrovsk. But the fact that these major developments are happening literally right before the Alaska meeting, and I would say they're correlated. It's probably happening on purpose, intentionally, because Putin is trying to gain some land so that way he can try to sell the narrative that Russia is winning and that Ukraine's on the back foot. That's why he did that. And Ukraine's also slamming Russia to say, look, we're bringing Russia to their knees, their oil economy is falling, and we have the upper hand. So that's not like an indication of peace, like between either side. That's an indication that they both want to continue fighting it out. So it's pretty clear to me at this point.
Yeah, it's pretty clear, and I don't really think anything will be achieved. If anything, Putin will do circular talk, and it really depends on whether the president wants to take that at face value or not, because Putin will probably be like, "I absolutely love peace. It's a wonderful thing. Peace is a great thing to achieve. A wonderful deal. Have you ever heard of the white dove that carries an olive branch?" And then the president might come out and go, "It sounds like there's some potential," or he may come out, "He's full of shit." We don't really know how he'll react to that, but that's definitely what Putin's going to do, is he's going to say, "No, I'm all for peace. I love peace," and then lay out practical unconditional surrender to Ukraine and the West as a whole to achieve a peace, which peace is not to be achieved at all costs. Everyone should know that. And if you ever believe that peace is to be achieved at all costs, well, look how that turned out for everyone against Hitler. Didn't really turn out that well. And it seems that no one really learned, or at least some people didn't learn back then that didn't work, and they still don't know it now. But nevertheless, I hope that does address it the best I can, at least on that current situation. And also, speaking of some developments here in the old United States of America, we were able to hear of something quite great. You see, down in San Diego today, the USS Carl Vinson has finally returned from its 9-month deployment at sea. And here's the clip. Look at that.
Look at that. All the sailors out there on the deck. This is what it looks like when a superpower has working aircraft carriers. You see that, Medvedev? That actually works, unlike y'all's aircraft carrier. That's kind of crazy.
Man, the Russian minds can simply not comprehend this sort of mechanical complexity and the fact that it really works.
Ours works so well that we scrap old ones when we buy brand new ones.
Man, ours work so well, and we have so many of them, that we put some of them in port, not to try and repair them to just keep them alive, but to upgrade them and make them even deadlier.
Man, ours works so well, sometimes we just take them out for a spin just to take them out for a spin because we got that kind of money, you know?
Man, so our carriers work so well that we actually have barber shops and ice cream parlors inside of our aircraft carriers. We even have Starbucks in there. Do the Russians have that? Simply not. I mean, hell, they don't even have real McDonald's in their country anymore. They call it vomit and throw up, or vkutsna i tochka. Like that sounds like it's not really a great country to me. I mean, they don't have American corporatism. That's third world right there. But anyways, and I mean, I'm not even kidding about that. That's just kind of hilarious to think about. Generally, if your country does not have some sort of an American company present in it, you're economically bad off so badly that they can't even see about turning a dollar opening up a store in your country, which means you're pretty damn bad off. But nevertheless, moving on from that and on into the rest of the news that we have tonight, we still have a pretty decent amount. And also, this is something that was very interesting today. Speaking of the leading up to these talks, satellite footage from Murmansk has shown that every single nuclear submarine of the Russian Northern Fleet is in port right now. Every single one of them, including the ones that carry ICBMs. Every single one of them. None of them are out at sea right now. And some people have been saying, oh, this is an attempt at de-escalation. I have a feeling it's the opposite. I have a feeling that it's the lack of money that Russia has to have these things underway. I have a feeling that that's more so the issue, because having them all in port and not even having a minimal amount of them out there inside of the Baltic Sea or the Arctic Sea or anywhere else for that matter is pretty shocking. Very rarely, if ever, has this happened. And as a matter of fact, we've never really heard of a time of this happening before, except for the collapse of the Soviet Union. So I'm generally believing that this might actually be a pretty telltale sign, a very big telltale sign. The Russians are starting to run out of practically all the money they have available. Otherwise, all of their submarines would not be in port. Because having these submarines underway, especially the ICBM carrying submarines, at least a couple of them, is massively important to maintaining a strategic deterrent at a nuclear level and ensuring that the nuclear triad of deterrence exists. And the fact that the Russians don't have a single one of these in the Northern Fleet underway, and we're also apparently hearing that this is the same for the Far East Fleet at Vladivostok, that is a pretty wild sort of a sign right here. Never really heard about that at this point, and I don't think we ever will. This might actually be showing us that Russia is going under. But anyways, with that, we'll be moving on from that little detail. And also, by the way, folks, I actually want to tell y'all that according to all information, and a big shout out to Preston Stewart for reposting this on Twitter, it appears that according to the Institute for the World Economy, in terms of billions of euros of military support provided to Ukraine, the United States has now officially been beat. The Europeans have now provided about $4 billion or 4 billion euros more support to the state of Ukraine than the United States of America. So now, the Europeans, at least in terms of spending, have the larger say in how the whole conflict goes. Now the United States really doesn't have the we spent more money so we get a larger say stake. Now the Europeans are the general majority shareholder at this point in armed financial support to the state of Ukraine, and the United States takes second place. A little bit interesting to see. And we also got to see that the Lithuanian the Lithuanian Ministry of Defense was continuing to show people through infographics published today directly by the Lithuanian MOD, the defensive lines and positions that they are building around the border to be able to try and protect their people from a possible attack from the Russian Federation. And it's very interesting because these were actually well-made infographics here. I was like, these are actually pretty sick. And made me think, dang, we ought to have some of these for our channel. Like, to explain some things here and there. Because that's actually pretty cool looking. Look, they have like the soil, the grass, the anti-tank ditch, the closed border control points, the minefields, the dragon's teeth, fortified strong points with trenches, and secondary positions with trenches. And then they even go into what the 50-kilometer long defense line looks like.
Isn't that a bit of an OPSEC violation, though? Like, I get the fact that the Russians could see it from satellite, but it seems like laying it out for them, like, this is exactly how we're doing it, and this is exactly how it is. It's like, I like to see it, obviously, because we like to have the information, but it seems like a bit of an OPSEC issue.
Oh, it's no OPSEC issue. All this would be seen from satellite anyways. This is just more so laying it out to the Lithuanian public. Look, we're doing stuff to make sure that we're prepared to fight to the death if they try and invade us. And so I would say it's not really an OPSEC violation. I would actually say that this is pretty transparent as far as the Lithuanian Armed Forces goes, to make sure that they're letting the public know that they're taking every concerted effort possible to be able to prepare for the defense of the country.
And
And
it looks
also,
like they're doing a pretty good job with it too. That second, the defense line echelons that they've added here, that looks like a pretty well designed defense actually. So it seems like it'd be pretty hard to get across. Like the Russians have a hard enough time just simply moving across open field. So moving across this water, landmine type deals, and also it looks like Dragon's Teeth. That looks like it could be probably a little bit too much above the Russians' pay grade.
it really does look like it. But honestly, folks, let me know in the chat. What are y'all thinking about this? I would actually put in a little bit of cash to make an infographic like this here and there for like a article that we could write on something every once in a while. Would y'all be interested? I can't guarantee that it would happen, but it might be an interesting sort of a thing to look into because honestly, this infographic today was wildly visually pleasing to me, and I actually looked at it for a couple of minutes. I was like, wow, that's really cool. I like how they did that. But anyways, moving on from that and out of the Lithuanian MOD, it's time for us to start getting on into a little bit of international news from East Asia, the Middle East, and then back into the Ukraine war, covering that in incredibly great detail tonight, considering that we've already been covering that in incredibly large detail over the course of the night so far. But before we move into all of that, I want to make sure that we get a couple of questions from the chat and chit-chat with y'all for a second to have a proper segue into the second segment of news. So Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so jumping into our three super chat questions, actually, our first three ones. Our first one here is going to go to, guess who? It is the channel legend, LC39A. And he puts in another massive support yet again tonight. A $127 donation. And thank you very much, LC39A, once again, for that massive support indeed. And he said, as an octogenarian, I've never heard that word before, by the way. I can't believe I got it right the first time. He said, but as an octogenarian, I'm told you can't take it with you. And that being said, I have no qualms about dying in debt. LOL.
And I thank you for the support, LC39A. Don't die in debt, though. Like it's always good to have a little bit left for the inheritance for the children and all that sort of thing. That's always an important thing. But I do thank you massively for the support, LC39A, and helping this channel to keep on running, because your massive support has been helping this channel to be possible and help us to keep this thing rolling day in and day out. I've got to thank you massively, so much once again, for enjoying this channel and supporting it, because folks like you help this thing to be possible every day. Your support goes into keeping Matthew and me fed, keeping our lights on, helping us to focus every day on this instead of what are the bills doing? Like, where are the bills? We get to focus on this every day. And I got to thank you so much once again for that incredibly massive support and helping this channel to keep on rolling, because if it was not for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to be here tonight like we have been for years covering this news once again. So a massive thanks to you so much once again. I hope that this address said the best we possibly can, LC39A. And also really quickly, folks, I've had something, and it was sent in by an old guard as well last night, old warrior, that has been on my mind. And I'm going to take LC39A's super chat for a second to address it, because old warrior last night brought up in the super chat, and I've tried to do as much research on this as possible, old warrior, because I was like, where are they really? I did as much research as I could to figure out what was going on with the 2nd Cav Regiment, and it appears that the military.com post about it may have been miswritten. And I tried to do all the due diligence I could do today. I did some decent research on it, and it seems like the whole 2nd Cav Regiment isn't in Poland. From what we can tell, and generally lines up with the brush up on research we did last night, some of the 2nd Cav Regiment is at this military facility right here, which is apparently some sort of a barracks. But it's an incredibly small detachment of it, and it appears to be focused entirely on helping out the whole of the NATO alliance in a multinational effort to try and figure out what they're doing with their drone forces. Some strikers are there. It's not the striker ATGM ICBM carriers or the Stryker mobile gun system. It's just the M11 26 Strykers, the armored personnel carriers, and the IFVs themselves that appear to be operating along with that small detachment. Beyond that, it seems that most of the 2nd Cav Regiment is still in Vilseck, Germany, still sitting at Vilseck, because I tried to look into it, and it looks like moving the entire 2nd Cav Regiment would be a pretty laborious task, although it is a highly mobile unit. They would have to load them up on rail and transport the whole Stryker Cav Regiment to that base in Elk, and it doesn't appear that that base has a large enough accommodation to be able to support the 2nd Cav Regiment, considering that they have an entire barracks compound at Vilseck that is specifically for the 2nd Cav Regiment. So either they would have to bivouac out there near that base, which is highly unlikely because they generally wouldn't want to do that for longer periods of time, and that generally would be part of an exercise itself. Or they would keep them at the Rose Barracks and then call them forward and then bivouac them in actual combat or a part of a larger exercise. I had to make sure that I did my due diligence on that last night, because you brought up, it was military.com, and I was like, maybe I'm wrong. And I was like, I have to do a load of research on this because there is a decent chance that I could be wrong. But it does appear that while some forward elements are in Elk, near to the Swalky Gap, it appears that most of the actual fighting part of the 2nd Cav Regiment is still in Vilseck. Also, by the way, I also wanted to share this with y'all because I was telling Matthew this before the show, because Matthew can attest, this has kept me up at night. I'm not kidding, Old Warrior. I was doing lots of research on this, and I was looking at it before the stream and talking to it with Matthew. And one thing that is actually pretty cool is that in their current structure, their troops, which are pretty much their companies that are a part of their squadrons. Weirdly enough, Cav regiments don't fall under the typical naming construct. In the regiment, their regiment is broken up into troops, which are equivalent to a company, but they have some really cool names. All of the 1st Squadron, 2nd Cav Regiments units are named after Native American tribes, like the Apache Troop, the Bull Troop, the Comanche Troop, and the Dakota Troop. I was like, this is actually really cool. I was looking through this a lot, and I was like, wow, that's neat. Like, the coolest one to me is that one of the forward support troops is called the War Wagon Troop. I was like, that is super cool. Like, honestly, like, I was looking at this, I was like, man, this is actually a really cool unit. Stryker Cav units are incredibly neat, but maybe one day on a second channel I'll make a video on a group like the Stryker Cav regiments, because they are incredibly interesting in their kind of force composition and how they operate. Very light and very mobile. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best we can. And also, really quickly, folks, we actually have to break away for some breaking news that's coming out at this moment before we get on to the next one. So, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so we do have some breaking news that's coming out right this second. We've gotten a brand new revelation here about some, it looks like some airplane deployments to Elmendorf Air Force Base in Anchorage, Alaska. And keep in mind, that is where the meeting between Putin and the U.S. president is going to be taking place. We've just gotten word that a pair of B-2 stealth bombers apparently landed at the base at Elmendorf Air Base in Anchorage just a day before the meeting. So it was today they landed here. So we're being told, and there's rumors right now, that maybe that is intentional to send a message to Vladimir Putin to let him see these stealth bombers up close, and also have them literally flying in the same day that some of his entourage is arriving there at the base. So it seems like a show of power, if you ask me, just my personal opinion, but that is quite crazy. These are the same B-2s that struck Iran in Midnight Hammer, actually. They're landing here at Elmendorf. So very interesting, and it seems honestly like a move the president might make. This is kind of up his alley, doing stuff like this, kind of like this sneaky symbology like this. Honestly, I would say not a bad move, honestly. But Enforcer, what say you?
He brings Putin to the hangar. What is this? These are the ultimate killing machines. We drop maps on the Iranians with these. We will do the same to you. No bunker is safe. Like, it's like, bro, if that's what happened, if that's what's going to happen at this Anchorage meeting, then I'd kind of be for it. Like, if we actually threatened them in a sense, like, look at these bombers, ultimate killing implements, I would be like, okay, this actually has a pretty good purpose. We're literally bringing this guy here to intimidate him on U.S. soil. So now this actually seems like it might actually be a fun idea. But that's only if it takes that approach. Like, if this is something like, look at our impressive bombers, aren't they wonderful, beautiful to work, I would be like, I don't know about that. But if we did like an ultimate killing machine, I would be like, yes, this is a pretty decent move, intimidating them like this. But that is interesting. they actually are flying in Elmendorf. This is a live camera at the Lake Hood Seaplane Base in Anchorage, Alaska. And if we go there, that ought to be close to Elmendorf. Let's see, where is the Lake Hood Seaplane Base? It's going to be somewhere in deeper waters. Well, not deeper waters. It's going to be close to shore. But where in the world would this be? Here? No, that's a barge. Where in the world would this thing be? Well, here's Elmendorf, so let's go up here. Where in the world is this seaplane? Let me just type this in. Lake Hood Seaplane Base. Oh, it's right here. Right at the airport. Oh, shoot.
Lake
that
Hood.
is Dude, that is cool. Look, they dredged out like practical runways for these planes to land in this lake.
That's pretty cool right there. I guess they're taking Putin to the hood.
We're taking him to the hood. We're going to show him all around Anchorage. He thought that Russians were alcoholics. He has not met an Alaskan. A lot of Alaskans drink. A lot. They drink a great deal. Everyone goes, why are they drinking? Well, it's because it's frigid and cold and there isn't really a lot to do. So kind of like Russia a little bit. But these are Americans and they are upstanding people. They are living in harsh environments and sometimes they have to try and cope with the environment. But still, so that does confirm that B-2 must have been on an approach into Elmendorf because it looks like it was looking somewhere out towards here possibly because of the backwards angle. We're seeing more of the backside. But it appears to have been landing at this runway 06 at Elmendorf most likely, which is the longer
Man,
runway.
we're treating the B-2s like that, like the most menacing like thing ever. Like it's the one thing that if you bring it out, people are like, oh no, not the B-2s. It's like fly them in, have them come sit on the runway. That'll scare them real good. Honestly, that's kind of giving Putin a piece of his own medicine. Because you remember how like Putin likes to pull those same tricks and tactics with the European leaders. Like he used to bring in Angela Merkel to like the Kremlin, and he would bring out this big ass like mean ass dog. Putin would like and have him sit there like right next to Angela, who was terrified of dogs because I think she got attacked by one when she was younger. So Putin would have this big like junkyard dog come out and like circle around her and stuff like that while they were talking, just to try to screw with her basically and scare her. So this is like the opposite. This time Putin's getting it.
Yeah, it's a pretty like if that's what actually happens, this is going to be kind of humorous. Actually, this might actually be pretty funny. But we're going to have to wait to see how this goes because, like, we're thinking it might be to intimidate Putin. Like, for all we know, he could be like, get in the cockpit, take a look, aren't they really cool? You know, and then that would be something I'm not really a big fan of. So it really depends on the context. But if it's the context I'm hoping for, I'm all for it. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that breaking news the best we can. Really interesting stuff to hear. But with that, it is time for us to move on to the second question of this segment.
Also, by the way, just pull up the picture of Angela Merkel with the junkyard dog circling around her with the Putin meeting. Pull that up, by the way, because I see people laughing about it. It was honestly, like, I'll say this, it was obviously a cruel thing to do because she was scared of dogs, but it was also kind of hilarious at the same time. He literally had a junkyard. Look at that. That dog is freaking massive right there. Look how uncomfortable she is. And look at that look on Putin's face. Like, he knew exactly what he was doing when he did that. But this is like a crazy big dog right here, honestly. I mean, I wouldn't be scared of it. Also, look at when it sat by her, too. It looks like a friendly dog, even though it's kind of like a junkyard looking like big dog like that. But I mean, this is crazy right here, man. That was crazy.
It didn't mean to scare her. Look at that face. He's looking at that dog like that dog's supposed to be doing all the heavy lifting in this whole meeting.
Honestly, though, it was hilarious. I gotta admit.
This dog is called Coney, apparently.
Coney, like, that's interesting.
Like Coney, like the warlord down from Uganda, I think. Like, I honestly think it's that guy. You know, like the Lord's, the Lord's, something army. Like, you know what I'm talking about, right? Down in Uganda.
Yeah, I'm kind of.
Dude, I think that dog is named after that guy. Like, because his name was Coney, I think. But beyond that, though, yeah, this is. Look at him, man. He's like, you got to get more aggressive, pop. Like, you're trying to, like, smack the dog a little, get a little angry, get it growling a little. Dude, honestly, though, that was absolutely diabolical. And you know what we ought to do, though? We ought to get Putin's worst fear, which is an accountant running in, yelling in Russian, "My Führer, the books can't be cooked anymore." He would go, "Oh God!" Like he would absolutely freak out, man. If someone came in and did that, I think Putin would have a heart attack and die if an accountant came into the room yelling, "The books, they've been cooked too much, they're collapsing." And dude, he would freak out. He probably would say, "Okay, we're on the plane." Trump would be like, "Where are you going?" And he'd be like, "China, anywhere but Russia. I'm not going back." But anyways. With that, I hope that does address that well. Jokes sometimes fall flat on this channel, folks. No laugh tracks. You just throw jokes into the wind, hope that there's a laugh. No laugh sometimes. But beyond
That
that,
was a good one. That was a good one.
my fellow Americans, it was a good one. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best we can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat here goes to IngX. And thank you very much, IngX, for that very generous $50 support. And we do appreciate that very much, by the way. That's a 50-pound support right there. That supports up there getting pounded. And we do appreciate that, IngX, very much. And he did not leave a comment, however, but we do appreciate that. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I gotta thank you for the massive support, Ingex, because if it wasn't for folks like you supporting this channel and helping it to keep on running, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible and keep this thing rolling. And so with that, a massive thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well, because while you didn't throw in a comment, the support is absolutely amazing, and it helps us to keep this thing rolling day in and day out. And with that, we are on to the last question of the segment, and then we're going to be getting on into the rest of the news.
And this one is going to go to Old Warrior, yet another channel legend. And thank you very much, Old Warrior, as well. He said, another YouTuber says Putin landed in Alaska. Any other confirmation of that? And that means an overnight stay if he's already there.
There was no confirmation of that. It appears that that was pre-posted from what we would know. Like almost like well in advance. The plane that landed earlier today was carrying a security entourage that is supposed to be preparing everything for Putin's arrival, which is pretty standard procedure for most world leaders. But it appears that that person was jumping the gun and reporting something that has not happened yet, because we have not been able to hear on our end that Putin has landed. And let me quickly check that before I say that. Putin, Alaska. Let me just type that in really quick. There is nobody who has said yet that Putin has arrived in Alaska. It appears that he's on the way, but they said that it's going to be quite some time before he arrives. So he's most likely going to be arriving by tomorrow, early in the morning tomorrow, most likely, because we already know that the president is also on his way up there, and all the Secret Service teams and all that are already heading up there to land at Elmendorf and start setting everything up for his arrival. So it's probably the chance that he'll be arriving early in the morning tomorrow. So that appears to have been reported early by that other YouTuber, like extremely early, most likely by about 24 hours. So with that, I hope that does address it the best I can, Old Warrior. Big thanks to you for support and help with this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that well. And I also hope, Old Warrior, that I did a great deal of due diligence on the 2nd Cav Regiment question, because I did as much looking as I could. And it seems that they're all in Vilsec. Still, once again, take it with a grain of salt. That's what I could find from my research. But usually those unit maneuvers are not said in great detail, and I can only confirm that a small forward element is in Poland. But with that, a massive thanks to you once again, Old Warrior. I hope that does address that incredibly well, and I hope that also answers both questions the best I can. But a huge thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, it is time for us to move on into the second segment of the news, where we get to talk about the rest of the news. And so moving on from that and into the international news, first off, inside of Taiwan, we were able to hear something a little bit crazy. It is a Hellfire launching truck that it looks like a delivery van. I feel like I've seen this somewhere before in East Asia, like from some place called the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, but I wouldn't know. Apparently this is a truck that it has a Hellfire launcher on board, which means that it can engage air or ground targets. Air targets of specific types. It can attack helicopters, but no actual fixed-wing aircraft. And it can also attack ground targets, and it's disguised to look like a delivery van. So it appears that this is something that the Taiwanese army is doing that is quote-unquote new. Is it incredibly new? Not really. The North Koreans are the masters of disguise. They make everything look like it's a peaceful piece of equipment, but it's actually an element of war. Let me go pull up North Korean disguised MLRS. Let's see. Here we are. Let me go get this. Ah, yes. The old dump trucks. We all know that they're just delivering cement, but what they're really doing is cementing your position in the grave, because it's really an MLRS. Or these, which are also delivery vans, but happen to have 127mm MLRSs inside of them. Or maybe this view, where you can see them not delivering bread, they're delivering death, apparently. We can also see these, which aren't really that disguised too well. I'd honestly say the disguise on that one, not really that good. But the North Koreans are the masters of this whole sort of a deal, at least at the moment, and it appears that the Taiwanese are starting to follow along to some extent, to some degree. I do want to make this a little bit clear, since we do have a question running on this right now. Disguising stuff, elements of war or implements of war as civilian vehicles is technically a violation of the rules of war, or in short, a war crime. Military vehicles are supposed to be clearly denoted in some way, shape, or form that they are a military vehicle. Civilian vehicles can be requisitioned for military use, but there has to be some sort of a clear identifier or some sort of marking on them to show that they have been requisitioned by the military for military purposes. If a delivery van like this was used in a conflict with China without clear markings showing that it's a operating vehicle of the Republic of China's army, this technically is a war crime, much like North Korean vehicles that are also disguised to look civilian in nature, but are elements of war. So with that, a lot of people have been talking about whether this is acceptable or not. And Matthew, what are people thinking about it, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right. So undoubtedly, the Hellfire missile trucks, they are pretty cool. I will admit that is a pretty cool sight right there. It looks like it's well engineered and well built and designed. But the question is, though, is this technically a war crime, or is it perfectly acceptable now that they've just unveiled it? So 56% said it's perfectly acceptable, no problems at all, while 21% said it's technically a war crime, and 15% said I need more info on it first. Now, technically, what this is called it's called perfidy, which is a war crime. It's basically making something look civilian that's not civilian. It's designed as a military weapon that, to the enemy, looks like it's a civilian vehicle. And what that causes is it causes civilians to get basically bombed as well in war because they don't know, they can't distinguish the military vehicle from the civilian vehicle. So that's why it's a war crime. So technically, it is. But the catch is, though, if Taiwan is fighting an enemy that commits war crimes out the kazoo, and they don't think about it even with a second thought, is it acceptable in that instance? And that's the debate. I'm going to be on the fence about it. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that technically, it is a war crime. I would actually have to be with a smaller percentage in the 24% that say it's technically a war crime, because technically it is. But now I will say that as far as diplomacy, we always have to be working from a position of unfairness, where we treat our opponents unfairly. But when it comes to the rules of war, those are generally made to ensure, at least in this instance, that the lines between civilians and the military are not blurred, and that it's incredibly clear what is a military target and what isn't. Really quickly to explain why this is an important thing, when you disguise vehicles as civilian and then you use them in a war, then the Chinese in a war against Taiwan have credence to say that every single delivery truck in Taiwan is a military target, because all of them could be a concealed Hellfire launching delivery van. So they could end up hitting and killing hundreds of civilians at that point, with none of them being Hellfire launching delivery vans, because one time there was a Hellfire launching delivery van, so all of them could be. And that's generally why it's considered to be a war crime, is because you're trying to confuse the enemy and pretty much use the rules of engagement or the rules of war against them by trying to make a war implement look like a civilian one. That's generally why it's considered to be a war crime. So I would say that this is legally, by technicality, a war crime, because this is starting to blur the line in between the military and the civilian. Really quickly to say this as well, if the Taiwanese did end up implementing this on a large scale, and then a war began, and then the Chinese started to strike and destroy every single delivery van that they ever saw, and killed hundreds if not thousands of deliverymen and drivers that were in these trucks, the Taiwanese wouldn't really have a claim to go, oh my god, look, they're hitting civilians, this is crazy, they're going out of their way to kill these people, because the reality is that the Taiwanese kind of made them all a target, because they have delivery vans that are launching Hellfires. That's kind of the same thing as in the Russian Federation, when we go, oh my god, look at the Russians, they're operating drones out of high-rises in Moscow. That's a similar thing. Like when people go, oh, that's terrible, they're hiding and using civilians as a shield, that's the same sort of a thing. Like in war, we're supposed to be trying to make the largest discernment between the civilians and the military as possible to make sure that there is no confusion what's technically on the table to hit and what's not on the table. So I would have to.
Also, by the way, real quick here, I was gonna get you to go back and check that North Korean truck picture. I'm told by Glock who's there that apparently it says it was spotted in the Kursk Oblast. So go back and read that real quick, and let's see if that was the case. I didn't notice that, so let's see if it was there.
Oh wait, hang on. There's actually a grainy picture of it that's supposedly from the Kursk Oblast right here.
So this weapon is potentially in Ukraine or in Russia?
Apparently, it might be, or at least a similar style of truck where it has a concealed MLRS launcher in it.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, Glock, who's there is right then. So apparently, North Korea has given Russia a few of those, apparently. So fascinating. But also, by the way, I see people pointing out another thing as well. They're saying, well, technically, wouldn't Operation Spiderweb that Ukraine conducted on Russia with these like secret drone boxes that went into Russian territory and then launched them on the bases to destroy their aircraft, wouldn't that technically also be the same type of war crime? And that's a little bit debatable because technically the Russians were the ones that actually brought those boxes into their own country. Granted, they didn't know what was inside the box, but the Russians are the ones who drove it in there. They set the boxes on the back of their trucks and they parked them next to these airfields. And then the drunken Russian truck drivers happened to stumble around and get out and walk around. Then all of a sudden the drones started flying around and hitting the base. So it's a little bit debatable on that one. But to build a vehicle specifically for the purpose of being a weapon of war for the country that's defending itself, I mean, technically it's a war crime. But here's my thing, though. Here's my thing. I'm not in favor of war crimes, but if one country is playing in the gutter, like for example, if China is going to have no like adherence to war crime laws whatsoever, if they go to war with Taiwan, then should Taiwan be held to the exact same standard in the case that China's committing war crimes like crazy and Taiwan's got to defend itself by the rule book while China's not playing by the rule book? That's always been a debate, which is a hot debate in my opinion. It's not really easy to say one way or another, but I would tend to lean toward the side that you kind of got to do what you got to do to defend yourself at the end of the day.
Also, really quickly to say this, technically the drone launches in Russia were not a war crime because that was not conducted by the Ukrainian military. That was actually conducted by the SBU. And there's a little bit of a difference there and a fine line that spies and saboteurs are not provided any protection under the Articles of War. If a spy or a saboteur is caught in the action of conducting espionage or intelligence gathering, according to the rules of war throughout the entirety of history, they could be summarily executed, which in elaborate wordage means that they are shot on sight and executed on the spot. That is generally the running rule in the rules of war for anyone who's involved in a spy ring or a network that is operating to conduct espionage or sabotage. So technically, it wasn't a war crime because it was the Ukrainian SBU, their equivalent of the CIA, that conducted the operation. And if the Russians had an issue with that, then they could just find those guys and summarily execute them. Or they could end up generally trying to find those people, arrest them if they can, and then try and charge them with some kind of a crime inside the Russian Federation, or they can just summarily execute them again. So that generally is kind of the workaround with that one, is that it wasn't conducted by the military, it was conducted by an intelligence agency, which the rules of war for intelligence agencies are literally everything. Oh, the gloves are off, you can do whatever, but if you're caught, you get shot on sight. So that's sort of the difference there. And this isn't the Taiwanese version of the SBU or the CIA. This is the Republic of China Army, which is the official army of the island of Taiwan that is doing this with the Hellfire trucks. So that's where the war crime side of things come in, is that the regular ground army is operating in a sense as a pseudo-civilian sort of a element, at least with the delivery vans. So I would generally have to be honest with y'all, I think that it is a war crime. And I see some people saying the rules of war don't matter. Okay, but here's the thing, folks. Like, I see some people saying that, and maybe they do, maybe they don't. But you can't complain then when Russia kills Ukrainian civilians. Like, you can't say that on one hand and then say, oh my God, it's terrible that they blasted away a 9-year-old in a city square with a missile. Because technically, if you're saying there are no rules to war, there's nothing wrong with the Russians doing that. There is something wrong with the Russians doing that because there's supposed to be some level of decency. We're not supposed to be barbarians. We're not savages. We're supposed to be civilized people from a civilized nation, and we're supposed to be looking at things things around the world, whether other nations are civilized or not, from a civilized perspective. And generally, we want our allies to adhere to a sort of thing. Otherwise, we really don't have a good credence to say, oh my God, they're killing civilians, because we're pretty much begging them to start blowing up civilians at that point. If we blur the line between the military and the civilians, that gray, there's no way that the civilians won't be attacked and killed.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And so with that, I hope that does address that. Well, at least in my opinion, folks can disagree on that. It is what it is. They're doing it anyways, so it doesn't really matter. But anyways, moving on out of East Asia and on into the Middle East, we also were able to hear that the United States has signed a deal to sell $500 million worth of M142 HIMARS, which means that there's 4 of them, and also some additional munitions as well to follow along with those HIMARS. That's costing Bahrain about $500 million, and will give them some longer-range artillery to work with. What does that have to do with a country that is only several miles across at the widest? I have no clue. But they're still doing it. So, there they go. They're getting some HIMARS. Outside of that, we also were able to hear that the Israelis are planning on mobilizing from their reserves 80,000 to 100,000 reservists to attempt to occupy and control the Gaza Strip here in the near future. Outside of that news and updates in the Middle East, we are now returning back into generally Ukraine war news, as we were able to see that an Antonov 124 that landed at Plovdiv today in Bulgaria was actually dropping off some Mi-24s. Where they came from, I don't really know. But these are Mi-24s that are bound for Ukraine, which will be helping out the Ukrainian aviation or rotary attack wings to be able to operate more efficiently, or at least in larger numbers with a greater volume of fire. Outside of that, we also are able to get into the Ukraine war itself, as we were able to get a decent amount of news today from the front. First, we were able to hear from Ukrainian intelligence that apparently North Korea is going to be sending another 6,000 soldiers and 100 pieces of North Korean equipment, including the Chonma-D main battle tank and BTR-80 APCs. Let me go show y'all a Chonma-D. These are great. A piece of real work, if y'all have ever seen one. Let me go get it. Here, wait, let me go get it. The Chonma-D. This is what they say is going to be arriving inside of Russia here soon. This.
Oh no, the plywood tank, the plywood Abrams ripoff. Oh no, if they get their hands on these, Ukraine could be finished.
I think they're going to be cooked. Dude, if they really send one of these and it ends up getting blown up, I'm going to have a good laugh. It's going to get blown up for sure. I can promise you that. No tank has survived the war so far. Not a single one unscathed. This thing will get blown up, and then the North Koreans will be like, oh, it was a glorious death. They fought like 9 million Americans in Ukraine, and then it got blown up. But beyond that, it appears the North Koreans are going to be arriving in full force. Beyond that, we also got the Russian casualty report, which there were no Bobcat losses. But Miss Disa... Damn, son. Where did they find that? They didn't find them, sadly. But beyond that, Miss Disa here with the record said, troop loss average stays below 1,000. Drones and vehicles rise sharply to above average. And over the past 24 hours, we were able to hear that 990 Russian soldiers were wounded and killed over the past 24 hours, along with 3 APCs, 191 supply trucks, 5 main battle tanks, 29 artillery pieces, 191 drones, and 1 MLRS. So in general, a pretty decent day for the Ukrainian armed forces. Moving on from that and on into the front lines, we were able to see near to the Kupiansk front, the 14th Mechanized Brigade was continuing to conduct anti-drone warfare, taking down Russian drones that were either attempting to attack Ukrainian forces or conduct reconnaissance on them. The 14th Brigade has been folks, I have a hard time with words these days on air, but they've been very influential in the defense of the Kupiansk front throughout the entirety of the conflict so far, and it appears that they continue to remain so as they attack and destroy these Russian drones within the area. We see them continuing to attack these drones. This is a Molnia. And they're about to hit it. The Molnias are getting pretty cheap looking these days.
Alemania, nasty drone.
Man, nasty. Like, that thing must be from Iraq, the way they backed that bomb up. God dang. But anyways, moving on from that and on down into the Severonsky forest, we also were able to hear, down in the Kremenna area, the Ukrainian tank actually did conduct a direct frontal assault against Russian positions. This tank was a part of the 63rd Brigade and started to blast Russian soldiers at point-blank range. We can actually see that in this clip right here as the tank fires off its first round and just starts rolling straight into Russian positions.
As you can see here, the People's Republic of Russia believes in having their snow coffee and eating the birds on Tuesday. But the problem is they don't make it until Tuesday because they're getting blown up left and right.
As you can see here, the Ukrainian drone draws up onto the Russian positions. The Russians use most of their money that they get from new military service to buy vodka, and especially crocodile. We can now see that the Ukrainians are beginning to dispense medicine tablets called high-explosive shells. These are provided by the generous leader, Volodymyr Zelensky.
Some say they go on their expensive Dell computers and they look closely to see all the losses on the loss report.
Sometimes they weep. That man's grabbing a blanket while no one's looking. But anyways, moving on from that, we also got to see the Signum unit also conducting attacks against light Russian forces inside of the forest itself. Like this guy on a motorcycle. Bro.
Oh, that guy looked back like it was a cartoon or some crap. Like he leaned forward and went, huh? It's like, yeah, there's a battlefield, and yeah, there's drones flying around. It's what they do.
Here we can see the only court bike inside the Russian Federation. Some people say that the Russians aren't very poor, and for this reason, the entire country came together to buy this ATV, which was rapidly dismantled by the Ukrainian armed forces. We can also see here that they are driving some kind of a shitty Lada pickup. These are considered to be equivalent to the Ford Ranger inside of Russia, and for this reason, the entirety of Russia has been declared mentally deranged, and any Russian arriving in America gets put inside of an insane asylum. What are they carrying in the back of that
almost
thing?
like
Bricks?
a ripoff. That looks almost like a ripoff Hilux or something.
Also, what are they carrying in the back?
I don't know, like oranges.
I don't know, but they blew it up. Thankfully, whatever the hell that stuff was. They also went after what appears to be a UAZ-469. Yeah, that's what it was. We can now see them targeting a Buhanka.
And look at it bouncing along.
Oh, dude, look at that guy over there, bro. Look, he was standing at the checkpoint. Look at him. Oh, dude, he pointed at it.
He jumped back in like, oh, scary.
Bro, first, man, he pointed at it. He said, look, and then he went and ran and hide. Watch him, dude. He does the whole sequence. He sees it, jumps, points, and then runs away. All in like less than a second. Watch. Done! And then he ran away
Bro,
instantly.
forgot he was security for a solid like 2 minutes.
Bro, they absolutely goosed the brakes. Look, skirt.
Oh no!
Oh
I think he burned the brakes out when he slammed him like that. That thing like lost all of its braking traction right after he did that.
Bro, oh, and now they're moving on to the next strike. It appears to be another Buhanka inside the woods.
That might be the best Russian security guard I've ever seen in my life. His whole job was to literally take care of drones and like the checkpoint and everything. And the first thing he does, he sees it coming along. Oh look, go! Oh no! It's a drone! Oh my God! Somebody call the police!
Dude, look at him, man. He's sitting there. He's like, look! And he points right there. There's his hand. He points right at it with one finger. He's like, drone! Someone call the guards! And he's the guard, and then he goes running away. Oh my God! And then
Bro
these
sold his comrades out.
Bro, they probably heard him in that shitty Buhanka over all of, like, the clanking going on, of them going over, like, nothing. Like, it just clanks because it's so crappily made. They heard click, 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 and then they went, oh, skirt! Oh my God. Man, that was probably one of the worst ways to go right there. But anyways, moving on from that and on out of the Severonsky Forest, which was full of comedy today, we also were able to see an attempted Russian attack once again on the Seversk front failing due to the actions of the Ukrainian 45th Artillery Brigade, which we can see operating against the Russians in this clip. Here we can see a Russian MTLB. These are about to be targeted by the Ukrainians and obliterated into nice pieces. They look very yummy.
As we can see, they just sparked up a light for a lantern so they can see in the dark.
The Russians are illuminated by the light and are also getting a little too hot.
Now they have their fancy heaters, keeping them warm during the winter.
This man, a United Front member, has been obliterated in a Ukrainian airstrike. I mean, like they have to include like a specific political party or something like that. But anyways, moving on from that, we also got to see a significant ammunition explosion inside of Yekinyeve, which is right behind the city. And I want to make sure that I get this right, of Orlivka. So here's the clip. Oh, what's that? Is that a drone?
Oh,
Я сняла его, пиздец!
Охуеть!
Еще один летит!
this is an outrage.
Man, why did that sound like mustache? Man, you're like, this is an outrage. I was like, bro, what the hell?
Куда улетел?
Его сбили.
Dude, they're about to play that cringe clip of him. I asked him to surrender 4 times. You know, I'm like, oh, lame. I'm like, lame. Come on, get better content. But anyways, moving on from that, we also get to see the ammunition depot explosion from another angle in this clip right here. That thing sounds like a nice fire.
This right here is the bloke that blew up my ammo depot.
Look at these people. They touched me on my depot, people. And you, sir, are you ready to receive my limp depot? How dare you, sir? What are the charges? Enjoying some ammo? Some succulent Chinese ammo? How dare... But anyways, moving on from the ammunition depot explosion and on up into the area of Myrnohrad and Kursk, it's time for us to get on into this area. First, we were able to see that some Ukrainian FPV drones were taking their time to target the Russians today. And say hello to them. Just checking on them, you know, making sure they're healthy and well fed and well dead, you know, in some instances. But we could see them here flying in the drones.
This is Moto Life Ukraine. I guess during their off time they were, you know, on those bikes and, you know, riding and stuff like that. But now they're on the battlefield and they're letting them ride in a different way. Now they're going to let them have it.
Back in the day, Motor Life used to be a Ukrainian motorcycler. Now, he is a Russian, I don't even know. I don't know how to make that rhyme.
And he's Ukrainian. He's Ukrainian.
That man's taking a blanket. But anyways, he seems to be hitting another position. Wow, that one had a steel door. I don't think it helped him, though.
Always make sure to bring your steel-toe boots to work. You don't want an OSHA violation to hit you real hard where it counts.
In Russia, there is no OSHA. There's only ocean, which is what you get thrown into if you don't do your job.
In Russia, they don't have safety organizations like OSHA. They have oh shit when it all goes wrong.
There's no such thing as workers' comp inside of Russia. The only thing that exists inside of Russia is workers' hurt. But anyways, moving on from that, we also got to see that the Ukrainians are conducting, in more serious note, forced evacuations from the villages near to the Myrnohrad breakthrough. This is more so a precaution than anything, and also considering that possible Russian artillery fire could be directed towards these villages, they want to make sure that civilians are out of harm's way. We also were able to hear that the situation is rapidly stabilizing within this direction, and the 1st National Guard Corps of the Ukrainian Armed Forces appears to be possibly counterattacking at this moment as well to cut off the advancing Russians and then further destroy them in detail. So, it appears that the Myrnohrad breakthrough, at least in the moment, sounds to be well under control. We're largely taking this one, though, on a day-to-day basis. We don't want to say that it's well under control, the Ukrainians are about to destroy them. It really depends on how the next days go. This is one of the few times in the Ukraine war that there actually is analysis that can happen. So really quickly, let me go and bring you all to the deep state map, which is more accurate than mine, at least with exact frontline data, and let me explain what is happening and what is going to be happening as a result of this action. So, right now, we understand that the entirety of the 1st Corps is surrounding this breakthrough in this area right now. And as you can see, there has been literally no advances over the past 48 hours by the Russians in this area, showing that they are completely surrounded and that they are most likely taking a considerable amount of losses at this point, considering that the Russians actually have what we could call a weak point in this area that's incredibly thin. The Ukrainian 1st Corps could conduct a pincer maneuver at Chikove and Novi Donbass to be able to cut off these Russians and then further trap them at Vesely and Zoloti Kolodias and then destroy them in detail. Either the Russians will end up surrendering or their units will be completely destroyed, wounded and killed. The wounded will largely be considered to be surrendered if they're found by the Ukrainians. The other option, however, is that the Ukrainians just sit the 1st Corps around them and the Russians fill in this opening or the void. If that is the case, this will become an active front line for the Russians that they could possibly try and exploit later, but we don't really know which way it's going to be going at the moment. Those are the two outcomes that can happen over the next following days, and generally, the wisest move by the Ukrainians, for the moment right now, would be to conduct a counterattack, at least around Shikove and also Nove Shikove, to try and cut off these Russians and then destroy them in detail later and ensure that this breakthrough is only that, a temporary breakthrough, and does not jeopardize the greater situation of the Dobrpilia front or the larger Ukrainian defensive lines that have been built within this area, which are still being built out at the moment. But nevertheless, we are going to be moving on from that front line update. I hope you all enjoyed that, because very rarely does the Ukrainian front line move enough or is fluid enough on any given day to actually give greater in-depth analysis that wouldn't become monotonous or mundane on the day-to-day basis, except for this one. This is actually one of the first times that it's been fluid enough that we can actually talk about it and what might be happening here in the near future. But moving on out of the Pokrovsk front and further on down towards Kharkiv, we also were able to hear that a Russian offensive was repelled in this area by the 118th Mechanized Brigade. Oh, we're going to be meeting that.
Oh.
You know, Matthew, there's a great kind of a combat vehicle down here, Matthew. You know what it's called?
What's it called?
It's called the AMX-10, and none other than the French.
Oh.
They've always been known for their excellence. There is a Ukrainian brigade inspired by that very same French excellence, and that is the 68th Jaegers. I believe they're the ones that actually have the AMX-10, I think. But they actually are down here around this front right now.
Interesting. That is interesting right there. They use those things like they're hard chargers, I'll tell you.
It is fermented in the bottle, and like the best French champagne, it's vintage dated, Parmesan. But anyways, you can see
it works well, as the narrator showed you. It gets you nice and snuggered. It does the job properly.
Oh, the cheap wine. It has always been known for its hangovers. There is a California champagne inspired by that $1 jug shittiness, and that is Parmesan. I can actually talk some dissing on them, because they actually went out of business because they were so bad.
Oh damn! Also, did you see that middle part of the clip right there? That Russian had like pulled a dirt bike down to the gopher hole. Did you see that in the middle?
No, I didn't. Where was that, Matthew? Please tell it. This one?
I think it's right here. I think. Let's see. You're about to see it. I think there's like he dragged the whole dirt bike into the gopher hole. Yeah,
oh
right
my
there. Look
goodness.
at that. Man, it's like that Fent market that I saw yesterday or in Seattle. It's like a documentary about that street markets or whatever. They like get the stolen goods and they like drag them into like places and holes and stuff like that, and then they start selling it. It's the Russians are doing the same thing over here. They call it the crocodile market.
Man, crazy. And there's no crocodiles around here. You know, I've heard of alligator Alcatraz. In Russia, they have something similar. They call it crocodile Donbass, and it's a very big popular thing for the Russian army. But anyways, that's generally the end of the clip. But it does appear that the Ukrainians were able to repel some Russian assaults today. Outside of that, we also were able to hear that the Russians lost an Su-30. Eternal flight, brothers. But in
Ground in the sky, brothers. Eternal flight. Fly upside down into the blue yonder, brothers. Thank you so much for flying that plane. I hope you ejected safely, brothers. Eternal sky, brothers.
Man, fighter bomber is also, by the way, folks, he's on the hit list at this point in Russia. It's night time before he gets wiped out or purged by the Russians, because they're not a big fan of him anymore, because he keeps publishing all of the deaths and losses of the Russian Air Force and then says, his normal thing, eternal flight, brothers. And let's see. Oh, wait a minute. He actually changed it this time. He said, and every time say goodbye forever when you leave for a moment. Oh, okay.
This is the dumbest stuff. This guy puts out the most dumb, taglines with these pictures ever. And also, the stereotypical thing. He said, let's make the picture black and white and make it look like it belongs at a funeral. It's kind of interesting. They don't put, the pilot's picture on there instead. It's like he puts the picture of the plane on there instead and talks about the aircraft being destroyed. It's like the pilot was taken out in this, too. It's like, where's the recognition for the pilot?
Actually, both pilots, I believe, in this one were killed because the Su-30SM actually is a tandem seat cockpit.
Yeah, so no recognition for either one.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like the pilots just don't matter. It's only the plane that matters in Russia. But beyond that, the Ukrainian MOD did confirm that the plane did crash. Apparently, it wasn't shot down; it just crashed, probably due to poor piloting or poor maintenance. We're not really sure which, but it did crash, and it was another loss for the Russians. I guess it kind of counts for Ukraine, maybe, but they didn't shoot it down, so technically it doesn't. But still, great to hear. But nevertheless, with all of that in mind, folks, I have to tell y'all before we even move on to the next one, because I know that many people are always jarred by this, and I am as well. It's really hard to do this. But before I get off of this segment, there's this little weird thing to happen. So usually when we reach the end of a news segment, we always go to a speech from the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, to kind of like have like a halftime show of a sort for us to go to the restroom, you know, have a snack, maybe get a drink of water, and get ready to run the next part of the show. And it also lets everyone else prepare. When I get off of this post right here, there isn't a speech from Zelensky tonight because he's still off in Germany. So he doesn't have a speech again. So we have no speech to show. So when I get off of this post here, we actually start moving on into the second segment of the stream immediately. And I know it's very scary and very jarring. It actually scares me a lot as well. So when I click off of this, if you hear me yelp, scream in fear, or sound as though I'm in absolute terror, it's because I really don't know what to do whenever this kind of thing happens on air every single night, because it throws me into whiplash. I just want to let y'all know because it's as scary to me as it is to y'all, and so it's time. Oh God! But anyways, with that, we are
The hell?
on.
I thought you were about to do a jump scare or something like that. I didn't know what the hell was about to happen.
Man, I'm just kidding. There's no jump scare or anything. It's just time for us to move on to the second segment of the stream, though, where we get to talk to all of y'all. Really quickly, though, I will try and make it not as jarring. I'll do a quick speech by Zelensky. Call it crivy-ree, the way we be criving up that gravy. We be beating the Russians' ass like nothing. I would like to thank these specific brigades in the Ukrainian army for doing one over on the Russians, really putting the elbow grease into them and really rubbing them into the ground with the elbow. I'd also like to give a huge shout out to everyone who supports Ukraine because they've been doing a great job. We are currently trying to get into the European Union to be a part of the money group because we like money. Money is a good thing. Who can complain about money? And to all the critics who keep on saying that I play the piano with my wiener, let me ask you, could you play a piano with your wiener? No, so shut up and sit down. I did it to make some money, okay? Would you not do it to make some money? I was worth $50 million before I became president of Ukraine because I played a piano with my wiener, and I was also in a television show where I was the president of Ukraine in the show, and now it's real life. So get bent.
From
It
the
is what it
streets
is.
of Kryvyi to the stages of Donbass with the grand piano that will have stories to tell for generations. Nobody will ever play that piano again. Nobody will ever touch that baby grand piano again. That poor thing. I tell you what, that poor grand piano, it's terrible.
I'll tell you something. I never had sexual relations with that piano, and I never will. I just did it for the show, and it was funny. And everyone has to admit it was pretty funny. I mean, when you look at that, you do get a laugh. And so, you know, like, if that was my job, I was a comedian. I was supposed to make people laugh. They laughed. Called me clown meat the way I'd be playing that piano with the winner. But beyond that, it is time for us to move on into the next part of this show, where we get to talk to every single one of you. And of course, I do have to say that we are always greatly appreciative for all of you watching. And I have to get out of that voice because it actually does a number on my vocal cords. But beyond that, I do have to give a massive thanks to everyone who's watched tonight. We had a peak viewership of 13.2 thousand people tonight, which is actually pretty crazy because that would pretty much put us in the exact same ranking we were last night, which was number 55 in America, which is kind of a little bit weird because we were actually number 51 the day before with far less viewership, and then today with more viewership, we were number 55. So I don't know where we're going to be today when the ratings come out, but we are still high on up there. And the reason why I show all the ratings is because this channel has become a phenomenon in itself. We actually beat out the Associated Press for viewership nearly 2-1 on their live stream that they had yesterday, and other news organizations like them, which is a pretty shocking thing to think about. And I got to say a big thanks to everyone who's continued to choose this channel to be y'all's primary source of news, because we were entirely honored and greatly appreciative to know that this channel went from being a small community of people who watched our show into a veritable army every night. 110,000 people have already watched the stream by this point on air tonight, and I'm pretty sure that we're going to be getting well beyond that before the stream officially ends after the question segment tonight. I got to thank you all so much once again for watching so far. Make sure to stick around. We still have a lot to go, and we have a lot to speak and talk about, at least at this moment. And so we are going to be moving on into the second segment of the stream tonight, where we get to talk to the boundless and limitless number of people who make up the Least Spring Army in the here and now. And so, Matthew, I understand that we have one last poll before we get to talking to everyone. And what's it about? What are people thinking about it? And what are you thinking about it?
All right, so it is now time for the final question segment of the night, and we do have that one poll remaining, so let's jump right into it. It says, North Korea is sending 6,000 more troops and also equipment to Russia to fight Ukraine, and what are your thoughts? 83% said the war ain't ending soon, Sonny. 8% said the wars are just about to wrap up, yeah, and 5% said let me chew on that fact. And no more chewing allowed. The answer is already here. And I would say the war is not ending anytime soon. That's pretty much clear at this point to me. And also, there's no really hope coming out of this meeting in Alaska either. And also, Russia and Ukraine are exchanging some of the largest blows in the war they've ever exchanged so far, literally a day before the meeting. So I would say the war's not ending anytime soon. And also, North Korea is also sending their little secretive, like, commercial van trucks with missile launchers in them to Russia as well. So no signs of it backing down. And why would they be sending more troops to Russia if they were planning on winding this thing down soon? So it doesn't make any sense. It's not about to wrap up, y'all. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say I would be with the 83%. This is not ending anytime soon. And I don't think Anchorage is going to be a huge breakthrough, to be entirely honest. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best we can, at least in our opinion. And with that, it's time for us to move on into the second segment of the night where we get to talk to each and every one of y'all. And I also have to say, wiretap them. But anyways, with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so jumping right back into our super chat questions, of course, our first one here goes to Trism666, another longtime channel legend, by the way, who puts in a very, very generous 100 smackaroo donation. And thank you very much, Trism, as well, for helping to keep this channel running and also being a longtime viewer as well. And Trism said, do you think the Russians may be swapping out to their more modern missiles on their subs? And do you think that would be a good thing for the rest of the world, since the newer Russian munitions seem to have worse success rates from what we've seen so far in the war in LSA?
And that is a great question, Trism666, and that might actually be the case. They may be trying to outfit or replace some of their intercontinental ballistic missiles with more modern ones on their nuclear missile-carrying submarines, like this Delta IV over here, which you can actually see has its launch bay doors open. We can actually see the individual silos inside of the submarine right here because the doors are open. But the problem with that is that if they were wanting to do that, they would do that piecemeal. When these submarines rotate back into port, they would replace the missiles with new ones, and then they'd send them back out. The fact that these submarines are all in port at the same time, and none of the ballistic missile submarines are out at sea, is generally showing something else is behind this than trying to replace the ICBMs with newer ones. They may be trying to replace them with newer ones, but considering that, at least from my standpoint, I think they're doing this because they're running out of money this badly and they're trying to conserve funds in any way possible, including cutting down on the amount of time that these vessels are underway, which ends up costing a pretty decent bit. I think that is generally the main issue we're seeing right now. It's not the fact that they're trying to replace the missiles with newer ones. I think that they're running out of money. And if they're running out of money, they're most likely not replacing the ICBMs either, because they don't have the money to even have these submarines underway at the moment right now. They probably don't have the money to outfit all of these submarines with a completely new array of more modern and advanced ICBMs, at least on paper. Although most of them are not really that more modern or advanced in practice, they generally have an extremely high failure rate. So I hope that does address it the best I can, Trism666. Very good question, by the way. But I generally think that that they're probably not replacing ICBMs. I think all these subs are in port because they're running out of money that badly. And so with that, a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. Because if it was not for folks like you, Trism666, who have been around forever, we wouldn't have been able to keep this channel running, and we wouldn't be able to have an amazing and long-standing community like the Least Spring Army. I honestly, folks, hate saying community. It makes it feel so corporate to say that. Like, community has been a word hijacked by corporatists. I wish we could come up with another word rather than community to describe the Least Spring Army. Maybe the army. Maybe the army. We've built an amazing army here. Maybe that's a good way to put it. And we'll put it in a New York accent. An army. Not an army, but an army. So that way a lot of people get that it's a national sort of a thing, you know? Because New York is a national. But beyond that, that made no sense. But beyond that, I do thank you massively for the support, Tristle 666, and help with this channel to keep on running. And of course, long live the Lee Spring Army. And the Lee Spring Army will never die. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here is going to go to none other than, it is going to be Gunfox. And Gunfox puts in that $20 support. He puts in 3 of them, actually. And he has some days in history for us today, which are, of course, always very interesting. And thank you very much, Gunfox, for that support and the days in history as well. He said, in the first one, the Apollo Soyuz was the first crewed international space mission carried out jointly by the United States and the Soviet Union in July of 1975. The project and its handshake in space. Question from the chat.
And thank you so much for the support, GunFox61. And this is actually a really big one. This was the first joint Soviet-American endeavor in space ever conducted, and it was conducted in the year of 1975. Matthew, what was happening in the year of 1975?
Oh, they were aging some really good wine out in the California Valley that year, I remember.
Oh, the Californians. Beyond that, I actually cannot think of anything in particular that was happening in, oh yeah, Vietnam fell in 1975, or South Vietnam did, and was taken over by North Vietnam. That is something that happened in 1975. We left in 1973, by the way, folks. The U.S. was completely out of Vietnam by 1973, and then South Vietnam collapsed by 1975. But still, pretty cool stuff. And let's see. Some other people are saying, let's see, what are people saying happened in 1975, I mean. Doesn't really look like a lot of people are saying what was happening in 1975, but still, a pretty cool thing that this operation was conducted. Let's see if I can show you all one of the pictures here of the handshake. Let's see here. Actually, that picture, dude, I don't know what it is about 1970s pictures, but they just look completely different than the modern day. I think it's the backgrounds, the way they were set, all that sort of a deal, and also the lighting.
Why's the guy in the middle look like looking like he's being threatened or something? Like he looks like he's in some serious fear right there. Also, the guy on the left looks like he's up to something. Like over here on the left.
I'm not gonna lie, man, if this was a frame in a Star Wars, like a Star Trek show from the original season, the music that'd be playing right now would be that bum 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 bum. Like this is where they hold him hostage. Like this is like one of those scenes. But let's see. Let's see if I can get you all the handshake picture.
Spock, you fool.
No, Spock. Spock, talk to me, Spock. Bum, 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 bum. He won't talk to you,
Damn it,
Kirk.
Jim, I'm a damn doctor. Stop trying to get me to do your accounting.
He won't talk to you, Kirk, because he was just a victim of my mind sifter.
Put that sword down, Sulu, and stop running through the ship like a fool.
I'll take you home again, can't leave.
I get that dumbass off the radio, too, pissing everybody off.
Oh, man. Let's see here. Oh, look. Gerald R. Ford was the president during this whole thing.
Oh, wow, look.
Dude, he's sitting in the chair in this way because he just fell down the stairs of Air Force One like the week before. I made that up, by the way. That did happen during his presidency, but I don't know when. But beyond that, though, let's see here. There's the Soyuz as seen from the Apollo. I always find it weird how the Soyuz always looks like it's covered in like some sort of a cardigan, like the fabric type covering this thing has. I always find that to be very weird looking.
Yeah, it is weird looking. It is very weird.
Very weird. And also, they assembled this commemorative plaque in space. It's like a little puzzle.
Oh, look at that fake Russian friendship again.
Man, friends forever until tomorrow. Like, and then we kill you. But let's see. Man, they took no pictures of the handshake, or they had no pictures of the handshake, at least here up, you know, on this deal here. But still, pretty neat nonetheless. Oh, wait a minute, it's in the National Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C. You only need a passport or a star ID to be able to see it. But look at that. I actually didn't remember seeing that when we were there.
They let us keep their stuff?
I think that's probably like a different Soyuz, because most of the Soyuz actually is left behind in space. The only thing that comes back is this little pod. Let me show you that. Like this, it's really weird. Soyuz, let's see, pod. Let me see if I can show you the pod that returns back to Earth. This is all that comes back of a Soyuz capsule.
Interesting. That's not very much.
Yeah, so what it is, it's this little part right here. So the whole back part pops off, the whole front bulb pops off, they burn up in the atmosphere, and then this little pod is the thing that returns. So I think this is not the one, because also the entirety of the Apollo, well, not the Apollo, but the command module here wouldn't have returned either. This whole thing would have burned up as well. So I think this is more so a replica more than anything.
Yeah, I think it could be, because I doubt they'd let us keep their stuff.
Yeah, I would have to agree. But still, pretty neat that they have that in the Smithsonian. And they also have one of these here in Russia, apparently, in Moscow. They actually have one of their own. And that is clearly not, that is a replica right here, because look at that one in that museum, and then look at this one. Totally different looking in the actual minor details.
Excuse me.
Whoa!
Excuse me. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Hi-ya!
Grab the mute button. Oh man! Oh, I tell you, that was bad. But anyway.
Oh!
Oh man, like that chef fella. I don't want to imitate him because I'll be accused of something, so I don't want to imitate him. But y'all know who I'm talking about, that Chef Roger fella. But yeah, honestly, their replica of the U.S. version of our stuff was terrible. Honestly,
man, it looked rough. Real rough. I was, but still, I do thank you for support, Gun Fox, and sharing this interesting fact on this day of history with us. So a massive thanks to you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And let's get to the next.
Oh man, I scared the hell out of some people. I'm sorry. I really was like actually desperately trying to grab the mute button, but it was so forceful, as you could hear. It was very, very forceful. I felt like my brain was like touching my head for a minute, like my skull or something. I was like, whoa, I'm like, what the hell is going on with that? And then I heard the noise like y'all did, and I was just terrified.
His brain was touching his skull. Matthew, I think it kind of does that normally sometimes. Like, I think it does.
No, it shouldn't do that. If you have that, it's brain swelling. Your brain is stationary and liquid in your head, so no.
But my brain's always doing that. Oh God, let's go to the hospital. I'm just kidding, by the way, folks. I was just playing. My brain doesn't touch my skull. But if you ever get like a little bit of whiplash, your brain actually does touch your skull, because it's suspended in a liquid emulsion, but it can wiggle around in there. So if you like for example, this is actually something very interesting about American football. Is that the impacts between players are actually rough and forceful enough that over the years it can end up causing brain damage, because your brain will hit the front or back of your skull enough times, it actually starts to damage the neurons in your brain. That's also something that happens to boxers as well. That's actually what happened to Muhammad Ali and Tyson. Mike Tyson is also suffering some symptoms of that as well, because if you get punched hard enough times, if you have enough force exerted on your head where it whips around really quickly enough, it actually will cause brain damage. That's actually something that you can see with a baby the most. Like the principle is the same amongst adults and infants, but with infants it's a lot more pronounced a lot quickly. I know a lot of y'all have probably heard of shaken baby syndrome, where someone shakes a baby and it pretty much creates brain death inside the baby if they're shaken violently enough for long. But it's pretty much the exact same thing that could happen to adults. It's just that with adults, because your brain is a lot more well formed, it takes a lot longer for that damage to accumulate or generally start to show itself in visible symptoms. But generally, you want to be very careful.
I really don't have no problems at all. I'm really perfectly fine. I ain't got no problems at all. You know what I'm saying? But some people are saying a TBI. I don't have nothing like that.
And I also want to let you know that you're just a rat piece of shit. Oh, come on, Mike. No,
Are you talking out of turn?
Man, you know what happens to people who talk out of turn. No, I don't,
who else would let their pigeons drink some Fiji water? Who else would let their pigeons live such a luxury life like that?
I'm going to have to tell you to go. Oh, really? Yeah, you're going to have to go. I'm sorry. You're going to have to go. But anyways.
Someone said bad Tyson.
Bad Tyson. Down Tyson.
Hey, look, I'm giving it my best attempt, okay? You got to give me credit for, give me some, participation trophy or something, an A for effort or something.
I mean, I give it a B plus. I thought it was pretty
Oh,
okay.
thank you for that.
But beyond that, yeah, you want to make sure, folks, like a little bit of health advice. Make sure to be very careful about getting your head jarred around rapidly a lot, because that will cause brain damage. It's a verified scientific fact at this point that it will cause brain damage, and depending on how bad it is, a lot faster than you'd think. Like by your 50s, you could start to show visible signs of neurological decay, which is not a great thing to live with. Just go look at Muhammad Ali for an example, or anyone else who's gotten jarred around a little bit too much in football or anything like that, and they're a pretty good example of what will happen to you. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well. And also, John Bomber
Someone
said,
said, "What is it? What is this shit conversation?" I said, "Who? If you don't like it, then turn off your station. Turn the channel to a new channel. I'm tired of that talking."
I just saw in the chat that John Ballman said, "What is this shit conversation?" And I said, "It's the one I want to talk about. You rat piece of shit." Have you ever
What is that, man? That sounds like you're on the toilet.
But man, like I'm trying to do like that little like whine Louising thing that he does after every sentence. It probably is picked up well off of Discord, but it is probably not picked up on Discord because my microphone, at least for the viewers, it hears everything. But for you, it only hears when I'm actually specifically talking, not the little noises. But
It's
anyway.
okay. Sometimes we gotta go at times that's kind of inconvenient. It's okay if you gotta go at times that's kind of inconvenient. Have some Fiji water. It helps it go down.
sometimes you gotta shit yourself. It feels good. Have you ever see a man die? It's like shit.
Have you ever seen somebody suffer?
Have you ever?
Impuffer 006, you're killing me. What is this conversation? Like, but anyways, with that, it is time for us to move on to the next one. I'm actually getting a kick out of that, but it's time for us to move on to the next one from Gunfox. So, what do we got, Matthew?
So moving on to our next one here that also goes to Gunfox. Thank you very much, Gunfox, for keeping this channel running and also foxing down them guns, gunning down them foxes. I got it backwards, but anyways, thank you very much, Gunfox, for that support. And he said STS-34 was a NASA space shuttle mission using Atlantis. It was the 31st shuttle mission overall and the 5th flight for Atlantis, STS-34, launched from the Kennedy Space Center, Florida, on October 18th, 1989. The Galileo probe was deployed.
That is really cool to hear, Gunfox. And let's take a little gander. The pics of the space shuttle always went hard. Honestly, the pictures will never be beat from the space shuttle. In my opinion, it was the coolest thing to see launched, just because of what it looked like. It was cool. But beyond that, I would have to say a massive thanks to you for the support. And also, look, it's the Galileo heading off to Jupiter. Look at that. That's pretty cool.
Galileo Galilei.
Forget it.
Oh man. But let me check some here. Yeah, we're not losing.
I was gonna go on a rampage there with that one, but I couldn't quite hold it together. But I was gonna try. I can't do it. Just go ahead.
Well, beyond that, getting on into the seriousness of the super chat here, this is very interesting history to know about the STS-34 mission. And let's just take a look at some of the pictures. That is a pretty cool picture right there. That's pretty neat. And that's a really cool picture. And that's a really neat picture. Look, it says Galileo on it because it's a Galileo probe. And then we also, oh, look at that. That's Greece. Look at that. That's, let's see, Athens is right there, actually.
Oh, that is pretty neat. I like to see the Earth from this angle right here. It makes you put things in perspective, all this stupid junk that goes on this planet. It's like, oh, look, it's insignificant in the scheme of looking down from space, but we don't get to look down on it every day. We get to, be down here on it, which is kind of like, it's good some days and it sucks other days.
Wow, and it looks wildly flat here in this picture. I'm just playing, by the way. The Earth is round. I'm not even getting into that because some people will take that seriously and be like, oh my God, you're so right. It is flat. No, I don't associate with those people. But beyond that, whoa,
what happened here?
This is apparently the Mekong Delta. I don't know what that's supposed to be though, but here's
Looks
the
like
shuttle.
nuclear annihilation or something like in the apocalypse. So like, look, there's been nuclear strikes.
Oh, look, this was a shuttle landing at Edwards Air Force Base. Pretty cool. And there was another picture of the Galileo probe and also the badge from that mission.
That's pretty cool. I like that badge.
And also here's the astronauts involved.
Oh, yeah, look at them all in polos and stuff like that. They look very corporate, like they're about to try to sell me a vacuum cleaner or something. Would you like an Orek?
This is a very late 80s picture. Everything about it screams the late 80s.
It kind of does, really. Like, the hairstyles are much, much different.
I swear, dude, I could see all of them wearing those little multicolored headbands and, like, you know, like the aerobics wear of the day and getting in front of the TV. Okay, everybody, exercises, lunges, you know, it's that kind of a deal. Like, they look like they all were into that. But beyond that, pretty neat stuff. And I do have to thank you once again, Gunfox, for the support and sharing with us a little bit of information about STS-34. And with that, we are on into the last super chat from Gunfox of another bit of info on this day of history.
And this last one here from Gunfox goes, and it says, I don't know what I'm saying there, but Gunfox said, Victory over Japan Day, also known as VJ Day, Victory in the Pacific Day, or VP Day, 15th of August, the official VJ Day for the United Kingdom, while the official U.S. commemoration is 2nd of September, and Japan initial announcement, 8/15/1945.
And I gotta thank you for the support. And Victory in Japan, or Victory over Japan Day, is a day that's not as celebrated as the 8th of May. But beyond that, it is still an equally important one, because it's the Allied victory over the Imperial Japanese in World War II. And let me go find that to y'all. The unconditional surrender of the Japanese. Unconditional surrender of Japan. Let me go get this here really quickly. Let me get this. Because there's a ship here that's involved that's pretty cool. This picture was taken on board the USS Missouri. And these are the Japanese signing the Articles of Surrender.
I want to see the Russians walk onto our aircraft carrier and sign the Articles of Surrender. I would love to see Putin being the one walking to the table just like that.
There they all are, getting ready to sign the unconditional surrender.
That guy up front is dripping like crazy. He's got the top hat, the cane, the white gloves. He's got the Gucci glasses. What? Who is this guy up front?
This is apparently just one of the representatives of the Empire of Japan. He's not even named, actually, in this picture.
Well, no name dripping. I tell you what, this guy here, he's got a whole nother. I'm not gonna lie. This was what year again?
1945.
1945. I mean, this guy was dripped out for 1945. That's crazy.
Man, this guy right here said, the Imperial Japanese Navy may have drowned, but I'm dripping. This guy was not playing. But also, by the way, an interesting story for all of y'all is that the unconditional surrender was actually signed in Tokyo Bay. The entire U.S. fleet sailed up into Tokyo Bay near to Yokohama, and then the Japanese delegation was brought down from Tokyo, which was the capital at the time. The capital had been moved a little while ago from Kyoto, which was the historic capital, to Tokyo. Kyoto, I believe, if I'm correct in Japanese, means old capital, and Tokyo, I think, means east capital or something along those lines, if I'm not mistaken. Anyone could correct me on that if I'm wrong. I'm most likely wrong. But beyond that, they sailed out into the bay, they boarded the USS Missouri, and then they signed the Articles of Surrender. But really quickly, I'm trying to see if I can find y'all another picture here, because what is actually neat about this is that there is a ship that was involved in the surrender of the Japanese that is still around to this day. Also, here's a picture of MacArthur declaring the unconditional surrender by the Japanese. And you can also see an American flag framed back there in the background. And you can also see representatives of the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union? Technically, they didn't accept the unconditional surrender. Technically, Japan and the Soviet Union are still at war. But there are representatives of the British, the French, also... that appears to be a Royal Navy down there, and a couple of other representatives of other allied nations that are not inside of the frame. But outside of that, one thing that is interesting, Matthew, there is a ship that was around that sailed into the Tokyo Bay area that accepted the unconditional surrender. Matthew, what ship is that?
I wouldn't know right off the bat.
Take a guess. Take a wild guess.
The USS Kawasaki.
The USS Alabama, which is actually still around in Mobile Bay. This ship right here was actually the first ship in the fleet that sailed into Tokyo Bay. It led the entire fleet in.
That's shocking that Alabama would do that. That's a remarkable achievement.
Man, we were rolling in going, yeah! Oh, they gave up, damn it. It's like, man, honestly, we went in like Alabama and we left as men. But beyond that, this was actually the ship that led them in. Interesting enough, the USS Alabama had a very interesting history over the war. And it got the name Lucky A because nobody on the ship died in combat through the whole war. I think there was some deaths from accidents, but nobody died from actual combat throughout the entire conflict on board the Alabama.
Interesting. That's good luck for Alabama, I guess. I tell you what, though, the Japanese were rethinking that surrender after the U.S. Alabama pulled up. They were like, well, did we make the right decision? They're like, we're not sure, but we did it anyway.
Man, dude, someone was playing a banjo on the side of the Alabama as the boat went by, carrying the diplomats. Bang, dang, bang, what the hell y'all doing down there? And then the Japanese like, I think we made a mistake. But beyond that, it is a very cool and interesting part of history, generally. And also, I saw a doodle pimp say, "Was it in combat? Was it in combat?" You say, "Was it in combat?" Yes, the USS Alabama was in a lot of combat. As a matter of fact, the USS Alabama faced down Bismarck's sister ship, the Tirpitz, and stopped it from escaping the fjord that it was hiding in Norway until it was airstriked and destroyed by Allied air forces. Just to let you know how much combat it was involved in. It was not only involved in a lot in the Atlantic, it was also involved in a great deal in the Pacific. But let me go and show you all that, because why tell you about that when I can just show you? This thing has one hell of a service record. Look at its Wikipedia page. This thing is freaking massive. Because it did a lot, actually. A whole load. And so let me see really quickly. Oh, hell. Let me see if I can show y'all one. So it was involved in the Battle of the Leyte Gulf, at the Leyte Gulf in the Philippines. It was also involved in the Philippines campaign as a whole. It also was involved near to the Palau Islands, or generally near to the Battle of Peleliu in general. It also was around for the Gilbert and Marshall Islands campaigns. Then it also was in the Atlantic, and let's see here. Here we go. Stripping away forces, most significantly the battleship Tirpitz. Accordingly, Alabama and her sister ship South Dakota got underway, screened by 5 destroyers. It entered the Orkney Islands, arriving in the main British naval base at Scapa Flow. There it organized into Task Force 61 Home Fleet, and the ships began thermo training to familiarize the American ships with their British counterparts for joint operations. They then pretty much cornered the Tirpitz, and the Tirpitz was sank. So the USS Alabama actually is responsible for Bismarck's sister ship being sank. And let me show y'all this really quickly, because if y'all don't remember what the Bismarck looked like, this is what the sister ship looked like, the Tirpitz. And let me go see. This was when it was hiding, and it did an okay job at that. But beyond that, it got bombed and destroyed. But this is the ship that it was hunting down and pretty much cornered, along with the rest of its task force. And it was sank inside of its fjord in Norway. So the Alabama saw a lot of action. It was very lucky that they didn't end up losing anyone on board, especially in the Pacific, because generally every single ship in the Pacific would end up losing someone, somehow, some way, to some sort of combat-related casualty, and the Alabama didn't lose a single one. So pretty impressive service history for the Alabama, at least. But I hope that does answer that question well. Also, here's another picture of it from the war.
Oh, look at that. They got that little, is that the real livery on the side?
Say what?
Is that the real livery?
That's the camo.
Oh, wow, that was pretty cool. I like that. It should have kept it on it.
Yeah, I think it would look better that way than the other that they have it painted up now. Let me see if I can show y'all. Here's a picture of it in 1944.
Oh, it's crazy to believe it's that old.
Yeah, it's crazy to believe that it's that old. Actually, I think this thing was laid down at the beginning of the war. Yeah, it was laid down right before the beginning of the war, the 1st of February 1940, and it was commissioned on the 16th of August 1942. So just about 10 months or so into World War II, it entered service. It was then decommissioned in 1947, and then it was stricken in 1962, and then it became a museum ship in 1964. So its service life was fairly short. It was only through the latter part of World War II, but it had a pretty good one nonetheless.
Interesting. Yeah, I like that a lot.
Yeah, it's a pretty neat thing that it's down in Mobile Bay, of all places, in Alabama. Crazy. But beyond that, I do thank you for the support, and I hope this channel to keep on running, Gunfox, and I hope that was an extra tidbit of information to add to the Victory in Japan Day Super Chat. So a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well, and with that, we are on to the next one.
Also, we have a poll currently running right now. It's a interesting question that a lot of people have weighed in on, about 1,400 people. It's a serious question. Just to make it clear, it's a serious question. Do you think the real Putin will be in Alaska at the meeting or a body double? So about 54% said the real Putin is going to be there, while 22% said it'll be a Putin body double, and 15% said it could be Slim Shady standing up. So I would personally say I believe the real Putin's going to be there. The president has met with the real Putin before, and if the phony shows up and doesn't really know what he's talking about that well, that's going to be a really bad sight. So I think the real one will be there. I'm with the 54%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd say I'm with the 54% as well. The real Putin will be there, because that would be weird if he wasn't, to be entirely honest with you all. The body doubles are for low-level events. The real Putin is going to be in Alaska, guaranteed. So I'll be with 54%. Also, really quickly, someone said I was wrong. I just want to correct this really quickly. Someone said, Enforcer's wrong. Japan surrendered on the Missouri. That wasn't even what I was talking about. I don't know if you weren't really listening a lot, but the USS Alabama was the first ship into Tokyo Bay. That had nothing to do with them surrendering on the Alabama. It just was the first ship in the bay. The Missouri was the one that they surrendered on, which we kind of touched on a little bit, but didn't say it directly. But that wasn't even at all what I was talking about. Just wanted to clarify that before some people said, oh, the Enforcer's wrong on that. He's wrong. Like, sometimes I am wrong, but on that, I think that was more so mishearing than anything. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and also, jumping on to our next one here, we have yet another massive support from guess who? It is LC39A once again, and he puts in a 128 Canadian support. And thank you very much, LC39A, for the second largest support of the night. And he said, my first super chat was a hundo, and I added $1 to every chat after that to keep track of my expenses. And who said talk's cheap, LOL? Now, I understand why you do that now. I was wondering, like, why does it increase by $1 every single one? So I get it now. So thank you very much, good sir, for that support. And also, who said talk's cheap? I tell you what, honestly, politicians talk is very cheap, by the way. Very cheap rates on that talk, by the way. Probably like a dollar for every 1,000 words. So their talk's cheap, but thankfully nobody else's is. But thank you very much, good sir, once again. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I gotta say, a massive thanks to you for the support, LC39A. The massive support once again. And I gotta say, that's very interesting to hear that you're doing that. Now, talk is generally supposed to be cheap on the channel. You don't have to pay anything to talk, but we do thank you massively for throwing in support at a premium to talk, because it is folks like you who help this channel to keep running, and we've got to thank you massively for that. Folks like you who didn't throw in support like that would be making sure that talk didn't exist at all, whether it was cheap or pricey, because we wouldn't be able to run the show for people to talk on. So a big thanks to you once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, it is time for us to move on to the next one. But a massive thanks to you so much once again, and I hope we addressed that incredibly well.
Yes, indeed. And moving on from that massive generous support there from LC39A, we are moving on to our next one here, and this one goes to WA. And WA puts in a $20 donation, and thank you very much, good sir, as well, for that support, also in helping to keep the channel running. And they said, isn't Putin an international criminal? Oh, yes, he is. He's an international criminal wanted by the ICC with an active warrant. So he's technically a fugitive. But they said, isn't there an arrest warrant for him? And yes, there is. He said, if he hits American soil, can we simply arrest him? Game over? Wes A, Day 4 listener, grandfather guard.
Well, we can't technically arrest him because, yes, he is an international criminal, but the United States is not a part of the International Criminal Court, which means that we do not have to follow through with the warrant because we're not a part of their jurisdiction, or we don't accept their jurisdiction inside the United States. So we can't technically arrest him, at least for the ICC. We could arrest him on our own, but we are inviting him here, well, at least the president, well, it's not really we, it's more so the president, in his judgment, has invited him to the United States, which generally means that he's being given diplomatic amnesty under a premise of diplomatic goodwill. So we would not arrest him, otherwise we wouldn't have invited him, because if we had the intent of arresting him, we would have not invited him, or we would have invited him and made it incredibly clear we had the intent to arrest him. So unfortunately, we could arrest him. We probably will not, and really we shouldn't, to be entirely honest, considering that we invited him here. But I hope that does answer the question somewhat well, WA. But a big thanks to you once again for support, and also great to hear that you're a grandfather god. And also, thank you for being an old god and helping this channel to keep on running. And so with that, a big thanks to you once again. And I hope that does address that incredibly well. And also, I gotta say, folks, a lot of people are saying, "Oh, arrest him, arrest that man." Sadly, we really can't. It would go badly. It would go very, very poorly. It would be a cool idea to arrest him, but in actual practice, it's going to turn out very badly. So we can't really arrest him. Honestly, once again, I'd say I genuinely protest the idea of even having them in the U.S. at all. Still, I think it's a bad idea. If we're going to go forward with it, though, we should do it the right way to make sure that the damage from such a goofy decision is mitigated. But beyond that, I still think this is a bad idea to even bring him here in the first place. Whether we were going to arrest him or not, it's just a bad idea all around. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best we can, or at least the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Steve, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, Steve, as well, for that support. He said, off topic, but I got a new job using AI to program AI, and the AI is actually better than most of the software engineers we employ. Dang, actually. And also, congratulations on the new job, by the way. He said, the singularity is almost here, and you guys looking forward to reporting on real-life Skynet? Honestly, Steve, I believe you 100%. There's a lot of people out there that do not buy the idea of artificial general intelligence coming right around the corner. And a lot of people say, oh, it's just marketing hype. It's just a ploy to get investments. I would say it's real. And you obviously have inside knowledge about it. So you're saying it's real. And everything I've read about it indicates that something is right around the corner. If you want to call it a singularity, artificial general intelligence, or I guess you could say quantum leap in AI, it's around the corner. And it could put a lot of people out of work. Which is dangerous for our economy because we don't want to end up a nation of people out of work because AI's replaced them all. So I would say we might be reporting on a real life Skynet, because I'm sure the government would love to use that to surveil citizens. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that is pretty wild to hear about. I do have to thank you for the support, first off. And second, I got to say that AI is coming around the corner. And considering, oh, goodness, folks. Considering that the Congress, in their all-knowing wisdom, has given pretty much no ability to themselves to regulate AI for about the next 10 years, this is going to come down like a shitstorm, best way to put it, onto the American economy, or generally the American public. The economy will be fine, technically. The GDP will skyrocket, but the public will be pretty bad off. Jobs are going to start disappearing somewhat quickly. So, that's something that's very concerning about that. I will have to say that it's something that I'm not really scared of, because we always must innovate, but at the same time, there has to be regulation to make sure that that innovation isn't destroying everything, because innovation that's uncontained will destroy. That's historical evidence is there to show that's entirely true. And it's a little bit stupid that the Congress not too long ago said, okay, everyone, we're going to let AI do whatever the hell they want, and we're also going to, by law, ensure that we cannot regulate it for the next 10 years. When in the world did the government ever do that? Never. Like, never before. Every single time something new popped up, the government usually was trying to find a way to regulate it, especially if it started to grow rapidly, so that way it wouldn't destroy everything else. And now they're like, yeah, let's just not regulate it. Let's enforce it by law that we will not regulate it for the next 10 years. That is ridiculous, really. I mean, that was absolutely goofy to me. And it will end up being goofy in the long run. But beyond that,
Honestly, AI only helps, it doesn't help bring any type of wealth to the people, like normal people of America. It just gives the people, and hopefully this doesn't sound political, it is just kind of the reality of the situation. It just gives the people that are already wealthy, it gives them a new way to generate more wealth, because now they can lay off a whole bunch of people, get rid of the labor expenses they had, which obviously lets them pocket more money. And now they can use AI to supplement the lost workers that have been fired. So the normal people lose out, and the people that were already wealthy get to expand their bank accounts a little bit more. So that doesn't sound very appealing to me. But I think the strategy by AI companies right now is to sort of make AI seem harmless by giving us all these cool ways to come up with cute little AI pictures and stuff like that. Like who's going to talk crap about ChatGPT if you can make a cool cat picture with it? Like nobody would do that. Honestly, it's kind of brilliant if you ask me. It really desensitizes people to the dangers that AI poses, because most people look at it like, oh, look, I made a cool cat video or with it or something like that. But really, though, it's a lot more serious than a cat video. It's much, much more serious.
Also, someone said the government does not regulate the internet. I hate to tell you, you're mistaken. The government does regulate the internet to an extent, like not to the point of trying to bust up monopolies, but beyond that, they do regulate a great deal about the internet to a decent extent. The government regulates everything. Like that's really the honest truth of it, is that the government regulates literally everything: the trucking industry, the railroad industry, the aviation industry, the agricultural industry, the steelmaking industry. Every single industry in the country is regulated to some degree by the government, because in some instances they can practically end up killing each other, and that's something that a lot of people don't know. But if you ever follow anything to deal with industrial history or labor history in this country, you will know that way early on, when the trucking industry just started in the 1920s, the railroads actually had a plan to pretty much cut their rates to kill off trucking industries for good and make sure that they would never pop up. And the government actually stopped them through the Interstate Commerce Commission and the Land Transportation Board from doing that, and then pretty much fostered a environment for the trucking industry to grow in, to be able to create a more diversified transport infrastructure and also allow for a wider variety of businesses and opportunities or options for companies to be able to transport their goods. Those sorts of things exist out there. The government actually pays farmers every single year, and has been for decades now, to destroy crops to artificially inflate crop prices to make sure that farmers stay in business. So that way their crops actually have some value on the market and they don't end up going into bankruptcy because they're growing crops that are so abundant they're quite literally worthless. Those sorts of things in every facet are regulated. Everything. So saying let's not regulate AI for 10 straight years and see what's happening, with how quickly AI is already evolving at this rate, that's incredibly dangerous for the nation's economy and also for all of y'all. Because people say this as a limiting factor to AI. Well, it can't innovate. It just can do what it's taught. But think about this.
Lies.
But think about this for a minute, though. Even if that was true, which it's not, even if AI could not innovate or create, and it can only do what it learns, what are y'all doing at your normal jobs? You're not being creative. You're not learning anything for the most part. Most people aren't in their jobs. They're doing what they were trained to do. All the fast food workers, all of the transportation workers, like pilots, engineers on the railroads, truck drivers, they're not being creative with how to drive the truck. They're driving the truck with how they were trained to drive it. And that means that all those kinds of jobs are at an immediate risk of being replaced by an AI, because as long as the AI is able to be integrated in some way to actually operate that vehicle, they are going to be able to take those jobs away from people. Those people are unemployed now. And where in the world do they go to get a job? There's not a lot of jobs that they are able to get at this point, because you have to have, in that kind of a society now, because most of the lower level, low education jobs are completely replaced, you have to have a high education set to be able to get a new job. Those people can't do that outright. They don't have that kind of money to go to a college and get a bachelor's degree. And even still, a lot of those jobs that you have to have a college degree for could also be replaced. So at that point, you have to have a doctorate, and even then a doctorate might not protect you, because by the time you spend all the years to get a doctorate, AI may be advanced enough that doctorate degree jobs are also disappearing as well. So at that point, where in the world does someone get a job to be able to make a living in this country? There really isn't one left, and it's generally because the government is not going to regulate this thing to make sure that it doesn't end up destroying every single facet and every single economic sector inside the United States. I think AI is good, and I think that we need to continue to move forward with trying to implement it, but at the same time, we need to regulate it enough that it doesn't end up steamrolling everyone and running them out of their jobs.
Yeah, I would agree 100%. They got to be careful about that. Also, by the way, I don't know if anybody knows this, but there's actually a investment firm in America that many people don't know about that actually uses AI to make their trades for them. It's a invite-only hedge fund that exists. I can't remember the name of it, but it uses AI to make their trades, and it's very, very successful at it because the AI is literally tuned to make the right trades. It gets active real-time market information, and it's literally like a money generator, basically, because it's literally like extremely good at it. So that to me is a little bit odd that you can do that. I guess it's perfectly legal, so I guess they could do it, but it seems a bit odd that normal investors are competing with people like that. That's why I've never day traded, because I'm like, day trading is the easy way to lose money. If you're going to invest, you got to invest in index funds or something where it literally just grows over time, slowly but conservatively. That's the safest way to do it. But yeah, you don't want to compete with the AI with a day trade. It seems like a bad thing.
Yeah, that seems like a pretty bad thing. I also see some people saying the fear mongering on AI is not helpful. I would fear monger on anything if it's unregulated. Like, for example, back in the day, the electricity infrastructure in this country was not regulated or semi nationalized, and that created issues. Let me show you this. Let's see. Electric lines. Early 1900s. Let me go find this for y'all really quickly and show y'all what that looked like back in the day before the government started regulating everything. This is what your average street in America looked like in the early 1900s. This was in Pratt, Kansas, America, back before the electrical grid was nationalized or generally regulated. That's what it looked like. And that is a huge safety risk right there. A lot of fires were started. All of these lines are carrying a live electrical voltage on them, so if you touch them, you get electrocuted to death. You can generally see why a lot of people were scared of electricity back in the day, and that's because for a little while there, the government was slow to regulate the electrical industry. So what happened is that a bunch of private companies would pop up, and they would end up offering competitive rates for electricity consumption, and you could go and get a different company. There would be like 8 different competing companies in an area, and you'd be like, I want Jim Smith's company to run electricity to my house. So they would have to run a cable all the way from the power plant to your specific residence or business, and then hook it up to their power supply. So the power grid was insanely discombobulated, extremely messed up, and this is what the result was. I believe that this was actually in Britain someplace. But it was nuts. So what the government did later is that they started to force, I believe it was around the 1920s, around that time, the early 1920s and the late 1910s, they started to force these companies to nationalize to an extent or regionalize at the best, to be able to ensure that there was a monopolistic utilities provider in the electrical market within a specific area. And that's why you'll see wherever you live now, there isn't options for who you get your electricity from. Like, for example, in Alabama, or most of Alabama, you're going to get your electricity from Alabama Power. If you're north in Huntsville, you get it from the TVA. If you're in California, you generally get it from Pacific Gas and Electric, because those are pretty much nationally regulated and created utility monopolies to stop this sort of a thing from happening. Just to explain once again how the lack of regulation can end up being a devastating thing. Lack of regulation will create things like this. Regulation is not bad. Over-regulation is incredibly bad. History has shown that. But a complete lack of regulation is also as bad as over-regulation. So the government always has to work a fine balance and a fine tightrope on not over-regulating but also not under-regulating. And in terms of AI, I think they've under-regulated or forced themselves into under-regulation to the point that that is going to be catastrophic for the U.S. economy over the next decade.
And also, if AI really takes over most of the U.S. job market, it's going to require a change in the U.S. economic system. Like, there's no way around that. A lot of the people that are in charge of AI have suggested a universal basic income, known as UBI, which is almost like a communist concept, basically. So because if most people are put out of jobs and they have no way to make money, and people are all, unemployed and they have no employment opportunities like they used to have, like very, very slim ones, the people will basically have to get subsidized by the government to sit at home and get a universal basic income, which to me that sounds terrible, because human beings require purpose. If they don't have a purpose, they get restless, they get into trouble, they get into situations which are not good, and it takes away the soul of America, basically. The argument is, well, China's going to get it first, so we should get AGI first, artificial general intelligence, or super intelligence, if you want to call it that, because we have to win the AI race. We're going to win the race at what cost? That's my question. What is China going to be able to do with the AI that is so damning to us, that we have to basically destroy our economy from the ground up just to beat China at the AI race? Like, I don't get it.
Yeah, I would have to say that it's a very sort of an interesting thing. Also, I have to say this as well. A universal basic income, in my opinion, is not a great idea. I will just explain really quickly. It's not due to the fact that, oh, don't give money to people, they're not working. It's a bad idea because what purpose will people have in life at that point at all? Like, they don't have a job. They don't have any sort of a specific goal in life anymore. They can have a goal. They're literally stuck there. The reason why they're getting a universal basic income at that point is because there's nothing for them to do. They're literally wasting space. We just give them money to continue to waste space. They have no goal in life, no objectives. There's no job they can get. They might as well be dead. They might as well be waiting to die at that point. If the economy is in that such of a state that we have to start giving people universal basic income and they have practically nothing to truly quantitatively live for at that point, I'd say that that is a terrible sort of a situation for the nation to be in, for the citizenry to be in. Because I'll be honest with y'all, if I had to pick in between having universal basic income and living in an apartment somewhere and never being able to get a job, never being able to try and aspire, even dream of getting out of that situation, getting into a better apartment or my own house because I'm stuck on a universal basic income and I can't get a job because I'm just not economically viable anymore, I'm obsolete for the large part. What do I have to live for at that point? What does anyone have to live for at that point? You have nothing to live for anymore. There's nothing to do. There's nothing to achieve. As far as you're concerned, it's over.
And also at the same time, UBI is not even compatible with our economic system. Like, it's not compatible with capitalism because here's the problem. If all of a sudden people are given a universal basic income, let's say it's like, I don't know. I don't even know what the hell they would pick because these days the living expenses are so high. You'd have to set it at like 3,000 or 4,000 a month at least, because the average one person needs about 3,000 to 4,000 a month to be able to survive in most economies, like local economies these days, at least in my opinion. So let's say 3,500 a month as your UBI check you get from the government. Well, at that point, now you got to go find an apartment or you got to go rent something. Obviously, you have to live somewhere. So if everybody's getting this UBI payment of $3,500 a month, guess what the landlords are going to do? They're going to raise their rent because they're like, oh, everybody can afford $3,500 a month. Now let's jack that rent on up there so we can try to attract the people who are still employed, the few people that are still employed, that are creatives, etc. We'll attract them instead, and the other people that are on UBI won't be able to afford our apartments anymore because that's the way capitalism works. They raise prices when they can milk more money out of people. So it's not even compatible with our economies, our whole system. It's not compatible with it.
Also, I saw someone say earlier, oh, that'd be great to not have to work so much. I could go see my family more. But the thing is that a universal basic income is not going to be a luxurious kind of an income. It's not going to be like, oh, you have money to go take vacations. You have money to go see your family, to take trips, to travel. It's going to be basic. It's a basic income. So it's only providing your bare essentials. Nothing involved in travel. You literally just sit there all day. Practically, like at that point, you're practically living on welfare at that point. That's probably the amount that would be given. It's not going to be much. And of course, like, it's not going to be anything great. Like, oh, everyone can finally live a life of leisure and enjoyment. No, there's going to be people in the government who are saying that. And then there's going to be the voices of people saying, no, those people aren't working and they're wastes of space. Give them as little as you can give them. And that's what they're going to do. They're going to give you as little as they can. And so you're going to be living pretty much on welfare. You will not be able to travel. You will not be able to live a life of leisure. You just sit there, still trying to pinch pennies, with no job, nothing to do even in most of the day to actually put oneself towards. I feel like you're working towards something. You just sit there, and you just sit there for years and years and years, until you die, and that's it. Like, that's not a life that I would honestly like to live. It just doesn't really sound like something that would be that enjoyable. Like, at least to me. But anyways.
The only people that's going to come out on top is the OnlyFans people. That's the only people going to come out on top. Everybody's going to try to pile on to OnlyFans all of a sudden.
I mean, I guess. Like, I don't know. Like, I have no clue. Like, honestly, like, is that all that would be left? Maybe. I don't know. But it's really sad, honestly. Hopefully there will be some regulation, or hopefully this thing doesn't end up spiraling wildly out of control. Also, I see someone in the chat. I don't know what it is. People always try and make straw mans. Someone's in the chat saying, I guess disabled people are worthless then. Who in the world ever said that? Like, who said that? I'm talking about, like, this is taking away people's goals, their dreams. It's pretty much leaving you at a dead end. Like, disabled people are not at a dead end. You can still do stuff as a disabled person. So I don't even know what kind of a straw man that is. That's that normal kind of a thing. I'll be honest, like, that kind of stuff gets me a little bit aggravated to the person who's saying this, because that's that normal kind of thing where you can say, I like waffles. Why the hell do you not like pancakes? You're pancakeist. Like, that's not even at all what we're saying. at all.
That's not even comparable either.
yeah.
It's just like if you're disabled, unfortunately, they try to make it to where many as opportunities as possible is available to people that are disabled. But unfortunately, there are some things that disabled people simply can't do anymore, and that's why being disabled is generally not a good thing. Obviously, because you can't do the same things you can if you're fully able to go do things. So if you're completely able to do everything like normally and you're not disabled, then there all these other people are being also restrained as well from those opportunities. It's just not good all the way around. And also, honestly, that whole argument really doesn't even come into play here because it's not even really comparable.
Yeah, I don't really know how that's comparable. Like, that's not even at all what we're trying to say. It's talking about like society as a whole. That's something to consider. What kind of impact this is going to have on society? That's what we're talking about, and it's not a good one. So that's kind of like my 2 cents on that. But anyways, we are on to the next one.
All right. And also, by the way, real quick, let's hit this poll question. Are you worried or excited about AI superintelligence? 67% said I'm worried, which is the overwhelming majority, and 33% said I'm excited. And I would say that I believe it's the intelligent thing to be worried about it. It's not, some people will be like, oh, everything new people are scared of is they don't understand it. I've done a lot of research on it. I don't fully understand it. I don't think anybody truly fully understands AI. Like even the engineers truly don't understand how it works. They have a gist of how it works, but if they tried to explain it to you, they'd have a hard time because nobody's really sure exactly how this artificial neural net, which is AI, works. It's just it just works, and that's the way they accept it, basically. It sounds weird, but that's the way it is. But once it does hit superintelligence, though, that's going to be something which is uncharted territory. And all these movies that have literally warned us about, oh, the robots are going to take over this, etc. That stuff sounds like science fiction because we've been accustomed to it being science fiction. But one of these days, it will be a reality because we're getting there, and they're already working towards it. And everybody's not going to be laughing when it becomes a reality. Everybody's going to be like, oh, crap, that movie that we were writing off as a movie actually became our reality because they made the technology work. So, I would say I'm a bit worried by it. Hopefully people slow down and start putting some, I guess you could say, some safeguards on it instead of just rushing to the finish line. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I would generally agree with that. But with that, it is time for us to get on to the next one.
And our next super chats here go to Robert Krogan, who put in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Robert, for that support as well. And we also had a 20 from Big Berg. And thank you very much, Big Berg, as well for that support. And we appreciate you both, Robert and Big, for that $20 support. And Enforcer, what say you?
I gotta thank y'all both massively for the support. Y'all didn't throw in comments, but we are still incredibly appreciative because folks like y'all help us to keep this thing running and make this thing possible. So a massive thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Also, by the way, I see people talking about the AI still. Isn't it kind of crazy? Like the way the engineers try to explain how AI works, this is their best explanation of how it works, is it predicts the next word in the phrase that is supposed to come next. Like it's just basically the engineers try to sell this idea to people. It's just basically like fill in the blanks like simulator or something. Whenever you put a prompt into it, it chooses the most likely word that should come in the sentence, and it just starts building an entire response based on predictive algorithms. I'm like, I don't buy that one bit. How is it like coming up with such personalized answers to very specific questions if it's just a predictive algorithm? That doesn't make sense to me at all, just from a common sense perspective. I'm like, it seems to be almost sentient. Like when you talk to it, it gives responses that are well thought out, extremely complex if you prompt it properly. And it seems to me like it's already pretty advanced. And it seems like maybe the engineers don't fully understand how advanced it is, to my understanding. But, that's just me. But moving on to our next one here, this one goes to Cameron, who puts in a $10 donation. And thank you very much, Cameron, as well, for that support. And they said, keep up the great work, you two, and LSA.
Hey, and a massive thanks to you for the support, Cameron, and helping this channel to keep on running. And thank you for enjoying our work. We try our best, and I hope that it showed through tonight. And I hope that you've been enjoying the question segment so far while I just smacked my teeth together inside my mouth. That hurt. But beyond that, a big thanks to you once again. I hope that has addressed that well. And with that, we are moving on to the next one. Also, I saw someone say normal people hate their jobs and only work because they need to get money. It's a massive waste of time and resources with no higher purpose. But the thing is, though, is that there is some sort of a chance of a higher purpose, at least in theory. Like, what's worse, working a dead-end job like that to pay your bills, or sitting around all day and doing literally nothing, like at all? I don't really know if a lot of people would even get that right now. If you are on a universal basic income, you have nothing to do all day long. And you also don't have expendable income because you're on a universal basic income. So it's not like, yay, I get to go outside and I get to go to Topgolf and I get to go to the shooting range and shoot a couple of guns here and there, or buy a couple of guns, or do this, or go do that, or go get a new car, or go finally become a race car driver. There's going to be none of that. Like, you're on a basic income. You're literally living on what's probably going to be equivalent to or less than a welfare check. You're going to be just sitting around all day doing literally nothing. You probably wouldn't even at that point have enough money to buy a computer to be able to play a computer game with or buy a computer game with, because once again, you're on something equivalent to welfare. So you literally sit in a house all day doing nothing. Like that, like to me, that sounds worse than even being at a job that I'd hate. And I've been at jobs that I have not liked before I started doing this one. And honestly, sitting around all day long with absolutely nothing to do would be worse to me than working at a job I did not like. That's just my opinion, though. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Jenna, last name Tolls, who puts in a $10 donation. And thank you very much, Jenna, for that support once again. And they said, I heard a war criminal's in town to eat tacos.
Huh, that's an interesting one, and we'll have to put that on consideration. But a big thanks to you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Jenna, last name Tolls once again, who puts in another 10. And thank you very much, Jenna, again for that support. They said the war's ended. Reports coming in that Russia gets Alaska, and America gets something else. They get a little something else there. VHS tape. I don't think we want that. But Enforcer, what say you?
Well, I have to thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And I hope that does address that the best it can, at least in my opinion. But a big thanks to you once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to this. I also see some people, like, there's like practically a battle going on in the chat right now of people who are getting violent about this. I just got to say this really quickly, folks. We're not going to always be regulated on what we say on this channel. Apparently climate change, which oddly enough, apparently was like a do or die sort of a thing for a lot of people, is something that we will not be touching on again. But I also want to make it really clear to folks who think that they're going to try and just run their mouths at us to control our show. This is the Enforcer show. The enforcers will say what we want to say. I'm not saying that to like put an ultimatum out to the audience, but if you think you're going to sit there and start trying to run your mouth at us and threaten us in the chat to not talk about AI because you just love AI and you're enthralled with it and we don't like it, and you think you're going to shut us up over because you disagree with us, you're going to be a little bit mistaken on that one. Because at the end of the day, I'm a person much like you are, and I have a right to talk about whatever I want to talk about. If you don't like that, you can leave. That's just the basic equivalent of how this comes down. But I do thank you all for watching in the meantime, but for the folks who are running their mouths like that, you can leave. That's your ultimatum. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so our next one here goes to Old Warrior, and thank you very much, Old Warrior, for that $10 support, and we do appreciate that very, very much. He said, the DC-10 is also the type of plane that crashed in Sioux City back in '89 when the center engine failed and destroyed all hydraulic systems and even the redundancies. Yeah, the DC-10 had a lot of flaws from what I heard, and honestly, though, I thought it was cool looking. I actually like the DC-10s. I think they're neat. Like the tri-engine design and also the shape of the fuselage was just pretty cool overall to me. But beyond that, it was riddled with issues. I honestly think, if I remember correctly, that the MD-11 was a little bit safer or more successful than the DC-10, if I remember correctly. And then there was the long-forgotten L1011 TriStar, which almost nobody talks about. But this was also a tri-engine design that was produced by none other than Lockheed, which you won't really hear about that happening a lot these days. But take a look at the interior on these things. Like, they were luxurious looking, actually. Well, I like how the roof is so tall in these right here. That's pretty impressive.
Dude, that kind of wasted space in a modern airliner, forget it. Like that would not happen. But these things were pretty cool. And look at these old vintage Delta logos. Like, honestly, it was a cool era in air transportation. The era of the tri-engines. Honestly, the old British Airways logo was pretty dang neat. Like, I think this thing is pretty cool. But beyond that, though, these are pretty much the trio, the trinity of the tri-engine designs that were commercially popular for a while. But the DC-10 was flawed with a lot of issues. Like, I remember like when Air Disasters first came out long time ago, like most of the first episodes they ever made were all on the DC-10, and pretty much all of them had to do with the explosive decompression of the cargo bay door, which apparently swung I think what was it, Matthew? It swung outwards rather than inward, and because of the pressurization of the cabin, it would put a lot of pressure onto the latch, and the latch would break, and the door would just pop open, and it would explosively
It was
decompress.
It was something like that. I can't remember what it was. All my knowledge comes from the air disasters episodes on that. I think the latch or something, or the bolts or something like that, like were not very well designed. I can't remember if that's the case though. Like, don't quote me on that. But there was something wrong where the hatch like blew off like a lot on some of these.
Yeah, it's a really wild sort of a plane. But let's look at the interior of this thing. Oh, wow. Honestly, a little bit more cramped than the MD-11. Like, the MD-11 seemed to hold up. Man, the L-111 was the one that had more room in it, like this one. These don't really have that much room. Huh. Also, this thing is huge, man. 9 across. Like, 9 seats across. And, of course, the narrow, thin aisles. But still, pretty interesting stuff. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. Big thanks to you once again for support, Old Warrior, and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so our next one here, and also by the way, let me do this poll real quick, since we're still sort of close to the topic. This question says, are you in favor of universal basic income (UBI) that the AI developers are speaking of, or at least mentioning in the periphery? So 54% said no, they're not in favor of it, and 46% said yes, they are in favor of it. And me personally, I would say for the main reason that universal basic income kind of puts capitalism on its head, that's probably not a good thing to do. Also, from a psychological standpoint, it does take away the drive and mode to people to generally go for it and be productive in society. It would generally take that away. And also, I would say that we shouldn't have to get to a point where we have to literally hand out taxpayer dollars to try to keep people afloat because we've basically killed off all the jobs in America. That's not a smart thing to do. So I see people that will argue that UBI is not communist. And I even pulled it up on Google right now, and Google's insisting, the AI overview, that no, UBI is not inherently communist. But it really is, though. Communism was all about generally having the people share the wealth, generally. There's nothing wrong with that in theory, but communism never works. That's the problem. So this whole idea of just like taking money and just handing it out to the people, it's not going to work, especially not in our capitalist society. It's not built that way. And even if we built it to be communist, it wouldn't work then either, because true communism doesn't work. And I don't want to hear any arguments about, oh, true communism hasn't been tried before. Bullcrap. Communism doesn't work. That's the end of the story. I've got tons of case examples to show you it doesn't work. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that UBI is either communism or it is hyper-capitalism to the point that it's run astray. I don't like either option of those. Hyper-capitalism is extremely bad, and so is communism in any form. It's extremely bad. That sounds like it'd be a terrible idea. And this is what a lot of people don't know or not thinking. And you have to think about this. When you work at a job you hate, there's always this idea, maybe I can get a job that I like, or maybe I can work really hard and get to a position in this company where I don't have to work this job I hate, and I can also make some more money. If you are considered, because of AI, to be completely obsolete, and there's no way for you to be hired at a job, because there's no way for you to learn or pay the money to learn and be certified with new skills to get a new job, you are stuck on universal basic income forever. You are never getting off of universal basic income. There is no aspirations. There are no dreams. You are stuck there. There is no way out, no escape. There will be nothing that will help you out at that point. You are living like that until you die. That is something that is really scary to me, because if that happens and you end up in that position, there's no way out. You're stuck there. Like if someone living on welfare, there's a way out. They can start working jobs. They can start working better paying jobs, and then they eventually to get themselves out of Section 8 or welfare. There is nothing like that with AI replacing most, if not every job, and you're living on universal basic income. That's what I would say. Like it kills drive, it kills aspiration, it kills it kills everything in the human soul. You're just stuck there forever. There's no way to escape, and there's nothing to live for or aspire for at this point. It's not like you can go, well, maybe if I do this, I can get some more money to do these things. No, it's just a base set rate every month, and it's only going to cover your bare essentials for survival. And a lot of
I think what people are misinterpreting with what we're saying here is I am not making the argument that, that people should work 2 or 3 jobs. Like, I think people are misinterpreting that. Just because I'm saying I'm not for universal basic income doesn't mean that I believe people should work 100 hours a week or 80 hours a week or something like that. I'm not in favor of people being worked to the bone. Absolutely not. I'm also not in favor of increasing the retirement age either. The retirement age is at a good age as it is right now. We don't need to have people working until they're like grandparents and literally barely able to walk and having to go work. That's not good either. So I'm not in favor of working people to the bone, by the way. I think people should be able to work a reasonable amount of time per week, and also be able to support themselves properly without having to go and, basically bend over backwards to try to go make just enough money to simply live every day. So I'm not in favor of that either. But also, people can't get so desperate just because our economy is currently a little bit broken right now that they're willing to accept basically a version of communism just to escape it. That's not the answer. The answer is telling the politicians to fix the system and fix it as the way it is right now. Let's don't convert to communism or something to try to fix it. Let's just fix the system we've got, make the politicians actually do their job and fix it that way. We don't want to get so desperate that we say, oh, let's bring in UBI to like fix it, because that's not going to fix anything. It's going to lead to the destruction of it.
And I don't know why a lot of people keep on pretending like, oh, UBI is going to be luxurious. It's not. It's going to be a government provided check. Has any government provided check in history ever been luxurious to a citizen? No. It's going to be the bare minimum. Like it's a universal basic income to keep you alive. It's not to make your life better. It's not to improve your situation at all. It's to literally keep you alive. That's it. Anything beyond that is going to be considered an unnecessary expense. At that point, if you are on universal income, just to make this a little bit clear for people who may not know, this is how it's looked at. If you were going to be on universal basic income, you were completely worthless to society at that point. You literally, the only reason you were getting a universal basic income is because they pity you, because you're pretty much stupid and useless at that point on the economic level, and you're just going to die and starve to death if they don't give you something. So they're only going to give you enough that you have food, water, and shelter until you die. That's it. It's not going to be, oh, I get to go have fun. It's going to be like Star Trek. I get to enjoy my life. Come on, like, listen, there's people in the government right now who are saying, oh, the government's spending too much money. It's time to start cutting down on the cost of everything. Do you not think that those same people are going to be around saying that about your universal basic income and cutting it down to the very bare minimum of what is humanly acceptable? Like that's what's going to happen, and things are not going to get better. They're going to get worse. As a matter of fact, it probably would get to the point that they would say, real food is something that should not be accepted in or accounted for in universal basic income. You're probably going to have to start eating some sort of a nutrient supplement, pretty much just like a block of nutrients that is calorically sufficient and also has the vitamins and minerals you need, because those can be sold really cheap, and these can keep these useless people alive until they die. And that's what they'll probably start to say, because that's what they're going to do. I mean, like, if you do not think they're going to do that, then you haven't been paying attention to how the government actually treats people for the past several decades. They treat people in the military, even as the recruitment numbers are falling, like they're useless. They treat people who are on welfare like they're useless. They treat anyone that they have to give a check to like they are absolutely worthless. So why in the world would we think the government would be any different in handing out money or treating people like they're not worthless when it comes to universal basic income? They're going to treat you like that. Thinking anything else is thinking in fiction. I hate to say that. And also another thing is, why don't we just try and fix the economy we have now, like Matthew was saying, so that way people aren't working 100 hours a week and working 3 different jobs and all of them part-time with no benefits? Why don't we change it to where people can actually work in this economy and actually have a successful life and a living? Why not? We've done it before. We've done it twice before, just in the last century. Why can't we do that again? We can, and that's what the answer should be.
Yeah, you remember the STEMIs?
Yeah, that didn't help anyone.
Yeah, the STEMIs. Honestly, my theory is I think because also by the way, folks, like the government is not as like inept as it appears to be. They sometimes they purposefully are inept because they don't want to fix certain things for a reason, but they do see ahead. Like there are some people that do see ahead into the future quite a bit. I'm not saying that they're like fortune tellers or something, but they have common sense and they see what's going to happen in the future. The STEMIs could have been like a test run of UBI, like Universal Basic Income, because a lot of people were like, "Oh, I get a," and when I say a STEMI, I mean a stimulus check. That's what I'm talking about. When they handed those out, like during the little virus that was going around and stuff like that, they would go hand those out to people. I can't remember what the qualifications were to get them. I can't remember at all, actually. Oddly, slipped my mind completely. But they would hand out the STEMI checks to people. And the weird thing is, the weird thing is, most people wouldn't even go spend their STEMI check on something important. They would go spend their STEMI on something that was a luxury item. That was the crazy thing. People went out and bought like firearms with it. They went out and bought like different things that they just wanted to buy, like expensive bags and stuff like that. They kind of just wasted it, honestly, from what I heard about most people.
Yeah, it kind of was. But it's an interesting thing, and I see some people. Let's see. Also, like like I just gotta say it really quickly. Someone said this in the chat. Anything that relates to George Soros, I do not even listen to. I hate to tell you because that's like one of those big conspiracy theory things. Like, for example, like people saying. I don't even know who in the hell is said on the right to be controlling everything in the background, but on the left, it's always the Soros guy, and that's not true. Like it's a conspiracy theory thing, and there's conspiracy theories on everything these days. Nothing can ever be just because people believe it. And I'll tell you, like the reason why I don't believe in any conspiracy theories like the George Soros thing is because we have been told before, if you like, and I'm sure you don't know because you don't get the emails we get. We've had people write essays to us that we're not even real people, we're lizard people or agents of Satan or the New World Order or George Soros or somebody because we don't agree with their viewpoints. And we become this part of this grand conspiracy theory just because these people are like loons. And most of these conspiracy theories are kind of like propelled by loons. And some well-intentioned people get sucked into them and believe them, but there's no merit to them. Because honestly, I never met the guy, and also I'm not a lizard. I just happen to be a guy who doesn't get a lot of sunlight. If I was a lizard, I'd have to get a lot of sunlight. I don't really get a lot. We pretty much work all night, and I only get a couple hours of sunlight every day at a minimum. So if I was a lizard person, I'd be suffering right now. But anyways. With that,
How much was the stimulus check, by the way? How much was the payment? Because I pulled it up. Apparently, you didn't have to like actually apply for it. They just sent them out based on income and filing status from your tax return. So, what was the amount of the stimulus check? Because I can't remember what it was.
It's like 2,000 or something like that. I think 2,400, I believe, the first one, and then the next one was smaller.
Oh, it's 1,400, I think, for the first one. It was 1,400 for the first one. There was 3 stimulus checks, apparently. Let's see. So $1,400 for the thing. Honestly, like $1,400 for the stimulus check. I mean, $1,400 doesn't barely cover anything. I mean, $1,400. I mean, that might cover some people's rent, maybe for a month. Yeah, and that's maybe because it depends on where you're living. If you're living somewhere more rural, 1,400 might pay your rent. If you're living somewhere closer to a metropolis, 1,400 might pay like a portion of your rent, not even all of it. So. I mean, hell, if that was like a test run for UBI, they got to bump that up a little bit, like double, triple it to make that even close to living expenses.
Yeah, but y'all ought to see what I mean off of that. The stimulus checks were insanely low. They hardly even covered anything. So it's like, so then people are supposed to go, oh, okay, yeah, universal basic income. They're definitely going to get more than that. Hell no. Like, come on, you got some detached people in Congress, all right? Like everyone on all sides is worth tens of millions of dollars from the speaking fees, arrangements, and the books that they sell. They are completely detached. Like every single one of them. Name one of them, and I'll tell you that they're detached. I'll give you all the reasons why. They have no connection to what the actual U.S. economy looks like. And they're going to sit there and go, these people, they can subsist off of like $1,200 a month. And then it's going to be a freaking disaster. People are going to be practically homeless and starving for probably the first several years. And then that's going to be one of the pressing things every election is, oh, I think that we ought to bump it up a little. And then people will vote for them and then it won't get bumped up. That'll be the next deal. I can promise y'all that. Anyone who's saying...
Bumping up the stemmies?
They'll promise to bump up all the little stimmies that you get every month on the UBI, and they never will. And if they do, it'll be an insanely minor amount, and that'll be it. They will not be doing much. And also, a lot of people are like, well, if they do that, though, then you can't buy all these consumer goods. Look, do you think these companies are going to care about that? Like, the economy could start to shrink at that point, but they've solidified their position permanently. They're not going to be uprooted at all. So they're not going to be doing anything about it. I mean, hell, look at already what was going on earlier. Like, when the tariffs were being implemented against countries left, right, and center, and practically anyone anywhere in the country who had to import something like a car or a model train or anything like that, those companies were about to get obliterated. Just absolutely. Like I can tell y'all, me personally, because the model railroad people went absolutely insane. They were like, we literally will die within maybe 2 months after this happens, because there's no way for us to even financially deal with this. Nobody gave a shit. Like, if the tariffs went into place, those companies were just going to disappear and die, and that was it. Nobody cared. And that's what would happen if UBI was implemented. Whole parts of the economy would just collapse, and nobody would really care, because what does it matter anymore? They've got people hook, line, and sinker. I mean, they get food, water, and shelter, the basic income to be able to provide for those necessities. Those companies are guaranteed an income at that point, and that's that. That's the end of it. That's what it would end up like. It's not going to be a great idea. I can promise you all that in the long run. With how this is going right now, like, unless if it's regulated, which it's not being regulated, this isn't going to be a good deal. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
In our next one here, getting back to our super chat questions, this one goes to Toybox, who puts in a 10, and they put in 2 of them, actually. And thank you very much for the support. They said, could the B-2s in Alaska be related to any of the training exercises going on and coming up? And maybe it's convenience, or maybe the timing of the talks during the exercises is deliberate.
And I thank you so much for the support, Toybox. And I'd have to say that I think that the moving of the B-2s is a deliberate action for the talks, because I don't think there's any military exercises going on in Alaska at all right now, and usually B-2 bombers are never really heavily involved in any exercises, at least to a great degree. It's fairly rare and in very small numbers, usually like 1 B-2, if any. So having 2 of them go specifically to Elmendorf in the midst of the arrival of the Russians, generally that would be considered an operational security thing, unless if it was directly related to that particular scenario. So I'd have to say it has more so to do with the talks than anything, in my opinion. But I do thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Spring Fauna, who puts in a 10. And they said, hi, Enforcer Matt. Oh, hello. Hello there to you.
Oh, hello.
They said, do we have more subs than Russia or China?
Yes, absolutely. We have more subs. U.S. submarine count. Let me go get that really quickly. So, we have 68 nuclear submarines. Chinese submarine count. China has 61 to 66. So getting on up there, but still a little short. And then, Russian nuclear submarines. How many do they have? Let's see. Well, do they have a specific number? 64. So we technically have more by a couple. So we do beat them out. So I hope that does answer that question well. A big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And also, by the way, a quick comment, then I'm going to move on to our next super chat here. One thing I literally said in the chat that it looks like a lot of people agree with, instead of the universal basic income, and this is the last thing I'm going to say about it, the government, instead of just giving out money for free to people, should simply find more ways to create scholarships, grants, etc., and also give people more opportunities that the government assists with to help people basically get into a pipeline to learn certain skills, to get right into certain job opportunities that are literally lined up. Some European countries do that. The United States does not do that. So if we use that money that we were just going to hand out so freely just to literally everybody, which is not going to help our situation, it's going to just hurt it. And instead, we help people learn more skills and grow their skills where they don't have to work, 2 or 3 jobs. Also, you still got to tend to the corruption and all that stuff with the corporations, but that's just another issue. But I think the money would be much, much better off put towards scholarships and things like that.
I would say that's very interesting. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Oh, and with that, we're moving on to our next one.
I thought that was the last comment. Like you left it hanging. I was like, oh, okay. I was like, well, I don't really have a comment. I feel like we're beating that one into the ground, sort of. I was like, all right, well, it's time for us to get on into the next one. So with that, let's call
it a fence post. I'm beating into the ground. But our next one here goes to Old Warrior, who puts in a $10 donation. And Old Warrior, thank you very much for that second support. He said, Enforcer, I'm going to break your heart on communism. I lived in Mennonite commune, and it worked quite well. The guy was religion rather than greed. It's not always bad. Is that really communism, though, Old Warrior? Is that really communism?
But like that wouldn't be communism then, because communism is specifically is atheistic in design. It completely expels religion. Like in the manifesto written by Karl Marx and Thomas Engels, they specifically said that religion was to be thrown out because it was an element of control used by the bourgeoisie against the proletariat to control them and make them believe that their suffering and poverty was going to be rewarded after they were dead, which is not the case, at least according to them. So it is not necessarily communism. And also Mennonites are like, for those of y'all who may not know what the Mennonites are kind of like the Amish, but different in some extent. Like, they are not as vehemently against technology as the Amish are. But generally, I would say that is not necessarily communism on a national scale. Like, on a community level, communism can work, like at a village level or about that size. Technically, it can. Like, nobody really refutes that because the sharing of resources at such a small and lower level like that, it's pretty easy to do. But doing it at a national scale is practically impossible. And that's where communism fails. And also, that technically would not be communism, because communism is directly against religion. So let me really quickly show that. Let's see. Communist manifesto on religion. And this wasn't about any particular religion before the anti-Christian nuts come in here. This is just about religion in particular. So, let's see. Let me see here. I need to go. Here we are. So, let me go get this really quickly. So this is in Chapter 11, Section 89 of the Communist Manifesto about religion. And this is where it starts off. Religion is the opium of the people. So you can already see that it is not incredibly a big fan of religion at all. And you can see that in practically every single communist state, you are treated as a second-class citizen if you publicly profess any sort of an acknowledgement or belief in any form of religion. That went for Islam, that went for Christianity, that went for Judaism, that went for really any of the larger religions or any even minor religion. You were generally persecuted for it or not really given the same opportunities as an atheist would be. So I do thank you for the support, Old Warrior, and I see where you're coming from with that, like at least on a smaller level, but speaking on national levels, which generally I am, because community levels don't really count too much, at least in my opinion, I would say that communism and fascism just do not work at all. But a big thanks to you once again. I hope that does address that well, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Is Forever Range, who puts in a 5, and they said LSA.
And LSA, and a big thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep rolling. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we've also got a 5 from Peter Florence, and thank you as well, Peter, for that $5 support. He said, "I'm surprised that the Ukrainians that didn't do something here to Putin when he was heading over there to Alaska."
And that is actually an interesting point that they didn't try that. You would think they would have. But a big thanks to you once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a $5 support from Skyfall. And they said, like the ancient Hawaiians say, never drink milk from a coconut that you found in the dark.
And I guess that would be true, I suppose. And I do thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 5 from Mark L. And they said, take one for the chat, please. And thank you guys for the hard work.
And I thank you so much for enjoying our hard work. And we will make sure to take one from the live chat. So what do we got?
And the live chat question goes to Jezza, who said, have you guys heard about the earthquake in Alaska?
I haven't heard about the specific earthquake in Alaska, but I did hear about the Kamchatka Peninsula earthquake recently. So I hope that does address that live chat well. A big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Croak Dream, who puts in a 5. They said, y'all think they're going to make Putin say thank you? Oh, yeah, they're going to make him say, please, Mr. Zelensky, can you end the war? They're going to make him say that. Like, totally. They're going to totally make him say that. Like, Putin's going to leave there totally just, begging for peace. He's going to want the peace so bad. He's going to say, please. But not really. Putin's going to say, you don't buy my bullshit? Screw you then, bastard. And then he's going to head back and keep the war running. That's my take. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to agree with that. I think that's going to be the case. But a big thanks to you once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to the Bearded Ham, who puts in a 5. They said, he's going to say, Putin, you either agree with this or that plane is going to fly to Moscow and our nukes actually work. Nah, I was gonna say that.
Oh, I doubt that. Honestly, the bearded ham, I think that's probably one of the least likely things that'll happen tomorrow, in my opinion at least. But I do thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 5 from Derek Pruce. And Derek said, Enforcers in history. What is your favorite battle to learn about? And y'all are amazing for all you do. And thank you. And remember to stay close.
Hey, and thank you so much for your support. And my favorite battle to learn about would probably be, there's so many good ones. There's so many good ones. It's really hard to say because I actually equally appreciate just about every battle I learn about, and I'm always heavily interested in them. Like, you could list one from really any era from the 1600s, and I'll be able to tell you one that was interesting, like the Battle of Naseby in the English Civil War, or, for example, in the 1700s, the Battle of the Cowpens here in America, or in the 1800s, the Battle of Waterloo, or the Battle of Sebastopol, or the Battle of Sedan, or the Battle of Gettysburg, or really, I mean, an endless list of them. I could go through most any war and talk about any of them. Or in the 1900s, the Battle of the Somme, the Battle of the Bulge, the Battle of Stalingrad, the Normandy landings, the Battle at Peleliu, the Battle at Iwo Jima, the Battle at Okinawa, like all of those endlessly, on and on and on. All of them are incredibly interesting. If I had to pick one, though, that would be my favorite, I would say that the battle, and this is very, like, this is hardly beating out any other, that the second Battle of the Marne is probably one of the more interesting ones to me, at least in my opinion. But I do thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, and I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Bobo Vasquez, and he puts in a 5. He said, love you two dudes, and thank you very much, Bobo. We appreciate that.
And thank you so much for the kind words of the support, Bobo Vasquez. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we also have a 3 from Plazoth, the longtime channel legend as well, just like Bobo. And thank you very much, Plazoth, as well, for that $3 support and also helping to keep the channel running. We also have a $2 support from Detroit Adam. He said, LSA, smash that like button.
Hey, thank you so much for the support, Detroit Adam, and make sure to hit the like button, folks. And actually, I was about to say, LSA Sergeant Figment didn't say that, but he's next in line. Make sure to hit the like button, folks. We've gotten up to nearly 4,000 likes tonight, and hopefully we can get all the way there. All the 9 yards, I tell you. But a big thanks to you once again, and we are on to the next one.
And we have a 2 from LSA Sergeant Figment. He said, LSA, hit the like button. That's an order.
And thank you so much for the support once again, LSA Sergeant Figment, the LSA Sergeant Figment, and make sure to hit the like button, folks. That is an order. And so a massive thanks to you once again, and we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Dark Sheep. And Dark Sheep just threw in a $10 donation, by the way, and thank you very much, good sir, for that support. And he said, LSA, LSA.
And LSA Dark Sheep, and a massive thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to the Playmaker 1271, who puts in a 2. He said, it's never a war crime the first time. Honestly, that sounds like that old saying like those moonshiner people used to say, it ain't illegal till you get caught. It's like, well, it's still illegal. You just hadn't got caught yet. I mean, it doesn't make it unillegal, or it doesn't make it legal just because you didn't get caught. It's just still illegal. I guess you could say the Putin regime is saying that now too about the war crimes. They're running around talking about it is not illegal until you get caught after they like slam a drone into like a civilian target, basically. But anyways, Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that that's true, but generally everyone's already done it the first time, and that's why the rules of war are pretty restrictive. Like, for example, generally banning Canadians from war. That's because they did a little bit, they partied too hard in World War I with the whole doing it the first time deal, and everyone was like, you know what, they ought to calm down a little. I'm just kidding, by the way. They're not banned from going to war. It's just that the Canadians were pretty voracious with the war crimes in the First World War. Go read about them if you're interested. But beyond that, I do thank you for support and helping this channel to keep running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And also a big shout out to Robert Krogan, by the way. He threw in another $2 donation. And a huge shout out to you, Robert, for that support and the thumbs up. We also had a $4 support from Vic the Red. He said, as Bender eloquently put it, destroy all humans. What? What the hell's wrong with him? He needs to get real. But they said it's socialist, not communist. Equally as bad.
I would say that socialism. I honestly think like anything beyond regulated capitalism, like capitalism with limits, is not really a great thing. Hypercapitalism, just capitalism off the rails, terrible idea. Socialism, not a great idea. And also communism, terrible idea. Fascism, also a terrible idea. I'm generally very heavy set on the whole capitalism is great, but with regulation, to not let it run out of control, create monopolies, all that sort of a deal. And I would generally have to say that for that, I'm not really a big fan of socialism. Now, to say that it's not like full-on socialism is a bad idea, but some socialist elements are actually not too bad because we actually emphasize a decent amount of them here in the country. If y'all do not know, FDR was actually well,
That's starting to get
Nah,
very
nah, man,
political.
this is historic, man. FDR was a Democrat socialist. That was a big thing that he got elected on with the New Deal. And generally, we still carry on a lot of those elements that he implemented to this day because they ended out, at least in very, very small forms, not being an incredibly bad idea. But a full-on socialist sort of a system, terrible, 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 horrendously bad idea. Much like full-on communism is a horrendously bad idea. You have to take some of the little itty bits, like tiny bits and pieces of the things that do work, and then just kind of sprinkle them in here and there. But you never want to go full in and be a fanatic on any of it because it ends up a disaster. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. Let's see. And also I see some people saying, let's see, full on anything is a bad idea. That's true. Full on anything is a really, really bad idea. Like full on democracy, like some people want to say, America isn't a democracy. Direct democracy, where elections are just, well, really votes are held by the public on anything and everything all the time, and there's no regulatory bodies or anything. Terrible idea. I mean, a horrendous idea. I mean, you can even go back and read the writings of Plato when he wrote The Republic, and he even said that that was a bad idea, just completely unregulated, rampant democracy. Anything that goes to the complete fanatic extreme of an ideological belief generally ends up becoming a bad idea because it completely forgets practical realities and concerns that exist. Socialism just completely forgets in its full fanaticized form that people are inherently greedy. So the system will never work because people are still going to be trying to screw each other in a socialist system. And it completely forgets human nature in that extent, much like communism does, but communism does it to even a more extreme extent than socialism does. Because generally Karl Marx claims in the Communist Manifesto that socialism is a building block to communism, a lot like hyper-nationalism is generally a building block to fascism to an extent. But still, I hope that does address it the best I can. At least not getting too long-winded at this point. But you want to take a couple of ideas here and there from like some ideologists. Go, oh, that's like not bad. We ought to do a thing or two like they do because it's not a bad thing. At least if you just microdose the stuff into the society a little bit. But going full into any one of them, it's a terrible idea. But anyways, with that, it is time for us to move on into the questions themselves, the live chats. And we're going to be getting the Morse code decoders of the stream and 3 live chats to round out the stream because we're starting to run almost overtime. But actually, we have one last super chat. So, Matthew, what do we got?
Yeah. So this last super chat here goes to Jesse Schaefer, who puts in a 5. And thank you very much, Jesse, as well for that support. They said, what are your thoughts on compulsory service, military, federal, state, or local government, or high-demand positions, and kids work, train, and college funded? Honestly, compulsory service, that's a tricky one because I would say compulsory service doesn't seem to be very democratic to me, like to be perfectly honest. I may think that compulsory service would maybe instill maybe some discipline into the youth of the country, but at the same time, though, in reality, it's probably not the most democratic thing to do. So it's probably not good for that reason alone. I would definitely not be in favor of compulsory service to the federal government, state, or local government. I would definitely not be in favor of that. Maybe military compulsory service, but only that, at least in my opinion. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'm actually against compulsory service of any type to the government or the military, unless if it's a situation of national emergency. For example, a large war that we get involved in that we have to, of course, end up fighting. Then calling forward compulsory service in a draft is entirely fine by me. But calling forward compulsory service in peacetime is not a good idea to me because it generally removes the democratic or largely liberal element that we've had in this country for 250 years, which is the idea that you generally get to choose, unless there's a situation in an emergency that requires you to serve. So I would generally say that I'm not that big of a fan of it just for the idea of the more liberal American principles that we've exhibited in this country for about 250 years. And through most of that history, compulsory service has generally never been the peacetime ordeal. During the times after World War II, it actually was for a while, all the way up until Vietnam. But I generally believe that that wasn't really the greatest thing to do. And I still think that we should make sure that military service is voluntary in peacetime, and in war, only if the situation calls for it, we begin compulsory service. Also, another thing to factor into that is that a lot of people could consider that, and I think it would end up becoming that if everyone had to serve. It will start to become a political indoctrination tool, because a lot of what the military in places that where service is compulsory does is it pretty much tries to indoctrinate you into the whatever ruling party's philosophy is in charge at that point. Like in China, if you join the PLA, you hear about nothing but Maoist philosophies and teachings. Although that's not really in vogue with the CCP these days, it always was. So it was pretty much a political indoctrination tool. Same as it was within the Soviet Union and the modern-day Russian Federation. The very same thing. So bringing forward something like that in America, you are just begging at that point for someone to start turning the military into a political and social apparatus of its own, which would not be a good idea. So I hope that
Also,
doesn't...
by the way, I got some news here. We just spotted Dmitry Peskov, the Kremlin press secretary. He's been spotted in the streets of Anchorage, Alaska. By the way, this is not a joke. There's actual pictures right now, just reposted. Peskov is loose in Anchorage right now. He's going to restaurants in Anchorage. It looks like he's going to eat at a restaurant here. That does appear to be Peskov, and that appears to be a very, very large security man standing by that Suburban right there. So, let's see here. Yeah, that's Peskov for sure. That's kind of wild. He's in the wide open like that. I guess nobody really knows who Peskov is outside of, like, for example, people that follow geopolitics. But yeah, he's actually on the loose in the streets. He's running free inside of Alaska right now.
In the Russian Federation, food is so abundant that FSB hitmen are actually fat. This man said that the restaurant was very yummy.
but man, bruh, he's at Jen's restaurant. Let's go look at the menu there.
Also, see where that's located, by the way.
Jen's restaurant in Anchorage, Alaska. Where is this? This is in the middle of town.
Wow, so they've driven pretty far off the base.
So this is here. Let's see if we can get this to line up. Also, the sign might have changed, but generally, that facade there looks like it might be similar. There also was...
What do they serve there at this restaurant?
I wonder. That's what I want to know. Let's see here. Let's take a look, folks. So this
Creative cuisine in an art-filled room.
So it looks like finer dining, actually.
That does look pretty good, actually.
Oh, yeah, this is what it looks like now. That matches up exactly. So this is it. This is the restaurant. Now we know for sure. But this is the kind of food that they serve here at Jen's restaurant. I'm not going to lie. This is fancy eating right here.
I'll admit this. Kind of ballsy for the fella to be wandering around in Alaska like that. You know, kind of wild. I'm not, now obviously, like I said, I don't think anybody's going to recognize him unless somebody happens to be a geopolitics nut or something like that, like we are here on the channel. But, you know, kind of crazy, actually, for him to just be wandering around. He's got one very large Mr. Lunchtime security guard, it looks like, and also a fella holding a briefcase near him as well. So not a lot of security for the fella.
I've got to be honest with you, the bodyguards that they give out in the Russian Federation live up to the name bodyguard. Their bodies are so large that they can guard you from gunfire just from the area that they cover. Very big. Like, it's very, very, very meaty.
But that is wild, actually. This guy is just wandering around in downtown Anchorage. You know, it's a little bit interesting that nobody has bothered him, for at least from what we've heard so far. Because there are a lot of people apparently in Alaska that are not big fans of the Russians, at least from what I've seen. So it's a little bit interesting they haven't started to gather around and crowd this guy while he's there.
Yeah, and also Destiny Edgington said, "Who took this picture?" Oh, you know, yeah, probably just a civilian took this picture. But you know, here's the truth: this Peskov may be wandering around the streets by himself, but he's not truly by himself, though. Like, he's really not truly by himself. There are people monitoring Peskov. Like, they're not going to let a Russian agent wander around the country without monitoring him. He is clearly under surveillance. Like, he's definitely under surveillance. So it may look like he's wandering the streets, but he's really not.
Yeah, that's what I have to say as well. But this is really quite a wild thing to see, man. The rat is wandering around the streets of Anchorage. I never thought I'd see the day.
He's probably wishing he could just stay.
Man, he's probably sitting there and thinking, "These wicked Americans, but this food is tasty," or something like, something stupid like that. But anyways, with that, I hope that addresses that well. Really interesting development there. But with that, we are on to the Morse code decoders. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so tonight we had Paul Schultz, Kevin J, Mason Miami, Joni Dog, Norm Pritchett, Erbo Garbo, Heroa Fluffiness, Cush, and Copioteryx. They said the Morse says the largest drone attack of the war happens just hours before the talks. Makes the message clear. LT LOC.
And that's the sound of money. And y'all got that dead on the nail. I got to congratulate the Lee Spring Army Signal Corps for continuing to get that message correct time and time again. I don't know what's going on with my English, folks. I have a stammer. But beyond that, I do have to congratulate y'all for getting that correct time and time again, because folks like y'all continue to get the Morse code message dead on the nail every night for everyone to hear. So a big congrats to all of y'all once again. And with that, it is time for us to move on to the third to last question of the night.
So this one goes to Chillin Vakin, who said, since Putin is out of the country of Russia, do you think we'll see a coup happen in Russia while he's missing?
It's hard to say. If it would ever happen, it would happen while he's gone. So it might, but I'm doubting it. So with that, I hope that does answer that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the second to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Silent Majority, who said the camera was pre-positioned at the point of those impacts in the last two drone attack videos that Russia was trying to show people. It suggests that maybe the Russians were the one that hit it for propaganda. And what are your thoughts?
Not necessarily, because there were people holding iPhones. They heard the drone and they're aiming it at the drone. And also they do move around a little bit, at least from what I saw in the clip, suggesting that they're being held by someone like an iPhone. So I would generally say that it wasn't really a false flag, and we do know that the Ukrainian attacks did occur, and these were clearly Ukrainian designed and operated drones, just from the design elements involved in them. They are recognizably Ukrainian. So I hope that does address it the best I can, and with that, we are on to the final question of the night. So who is like the last person who threw in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is Old Warrior. And he said, are the two Russian jets that overflew Lithuania going to be in the discussion tonight?
Actually, we did not hear about that, and I don't think we even had that on our Twitter if it did happen. So it doesn't appear that we were addressing that tonight, because I didn't see it myself. So with that, I hope that does address that the best we can, and we have reached the end of tonight's stream. I've got to thank you all so much once again for watching tonight. It's been an absolute honor and a pleasure getting to cover this stream and the news for each and every one of y'all. We had a peak viewership tonight of 13.2 thousand people, and 140,000 people nearly have watched this stream before it ended. I've got to thank you all so much once again for watching, and of course we thank you all for continuing to choose the Enforcer channel to be your primary source of news. We will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of news from around the world, and if there is enough news in the middle of the day, Enforcer Matt will be making the Short War Summary. And I bet you that there will be, because there'll probably be some interesting stuff happening in Alaska tomorrow. And so with that, we will see you all then. Good night, good luck, take care, stay safe. Slava Ukraini, long live the Republic, and long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never die.
And with that, folks, we will see you all tomorrow night, like the Enforcer said, at 10 p.m. Eastern for the next nightly War News stream, and also midday tomorrow as well for a Short War video, because, of course, the news will probably be crazy tomorrow, because, of course, that meeting is taking place, and I'm sure there will be some developments out of that, but also, huge shout-out to the 137,000 people that were here by the end of the stream. That's a large number of people, and we were glad to have every single one of you once again tonight. So with that, folks, Slava Ukraine, Herom Slava, get some rest, and good night.